Little ditty about this master plan. Gonna make a geode out of this flat land. Just look at the sky, that's like a hemisphere of stars. Seems all we'll need to do is plot the land like they are. Such that it's plain and this won't be just a breeze. Have to make a curve and map, force it to match above what we see. Someone says, so since we're live.
All right, we're live.
Excellent. Thank you for tuning in. If you are on Space Audits or here on Ether Cosmology or wherever you may be listening from, welcome to Bring Your Own Brenner Comp number 2. It's the second time we've done this, and what it is we are going to read questions and answers as posed on Quora.com, and the answers are specifically from those from Michael Brenner, an account on Quora that tends to have a lot of counter paradigm answers that are quite intriguing. So we just ask everyone to go ahead and find one of his answers and bring it and read it. So that's what we're going to do. And so I'll go ahead and start us off.
Nice.
Let me share my screen. We'll do 720. All right. So the question is, Roger Penrose says, string theory is fashion, quantum physics is faith, and quantum inflation or cosmic inflation is fantasy. Is he right? Of course he is right. With every word he says, and with Penrose, there is no dithering about expertise or not. He knows what he is talking about. But he's in no way the only expert, quote unquote, who is unhappy with the revolutionary ideas of the 20th century. The very founders of it grew quite disenchanted with them towards the end of their lives. It's just that we don't listen to a wizened Einstein or Schrodinger or Heisenberg. For them, the revolution of the 20th century was over by the end of the 1950s, when they realized it was all a figment of imagination without any potential for gaining real knowledge about nature. Here's the resume. Schrodinger. Let me say at the outset that in this discourse, I'm opposing not a few special statements of quantum mechanics / quantum theory held today in the 1950s. I'm opposing as it were the whole of it. I am opposing its basic views that have been shaped 25 years ago when Max Born put forward his probability interpretation, which was accepted by almost everybody. I don't like it, and I'm sorry I ever had anything to do with it. And that was Schrodinger in the interpretation of quantum mechanics. And then here's Heisenberg. That even major modifications of present physical theories would not transform them into the desired new theory, as quite different and novel ideas are required. Secondly, the impact of quantum theory and relativity theory on the minds of those scholars who helped found them during the first half of our century is conceivably such that they are imprisoned by these theories and thus cannot help but reason conformably, that is, in terms of traditional concepts, whereas the need is for a whole revolution of thought, which can be only carried out by nonconformists. And that was in Mercier in 1971, and then Einstein. I consider it quite possible that physics cannot be based on the field concept, i.e., on continuous structures. In that case, nothing remains of my entire castle in the air, gravitation theory included, and of the rest of modern physics. The theories of the 20th century only hold for those who are willing to accept the absurd, something Newton already found to be a preposterous proposition. And here's a quote from Newton. It is inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without mediation of something else which is not matter, operate on and affect other matter without mutual contact. that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum without the mediation of anything else by and through which their action may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Ha! And that was in 1693. A mechanical cosmology based on mass and matter is doomed to fail and shouldn't have survived Newton himself, because in 1687, in the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, as a response to Boyle's gas experiments, he showed mathematically that if an elastic fluid containing of particles which are repulsive forces inversely proportional to their distance, the density would be directly proportional to the pressure. Newton didn't consider the sun a gas ball, so he didn't express an opinion about such a concept, but he showed for all posterity that a gas ball sun is an impossibility, and therefore that a cosmology based on a giant gas ball sun attracting planets of solid matter is mysticism, not science, despite their computational success. And now that is exactly what Penrose is trying to convey here, a theory which does not make sense, but can be computationally correlated to observation as worthless as a theory which can be computationally correlated to observation is as worthless as a theory which seems to make sense in itself but has no correlation to observation. So there you go. That was a little short one to start us off. Does anyone else have one they want to read, or should I get into another?
Well, I brought one.
Are you ready? You want to go ahead and read it?
Should we do it now or should we wait? That's your question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, let me upload it to the live chat here. I've got a PDF for you guys to read.
Cool.
Nice. I'm back.
Actually,
To step away for a second.
cool.
Did you finish that one already?
Yeah, it was a short one. I don't have my second one ready yet, so I need to.
What?
You got one, Alan?
Yeah, I can go right now.
Okay, how about you do it, and then I'll do the one I just uploaded to the live chat. It's on Occam's razor.
All right, cool. We'll start off with, how exactly did Cavendish determine G with his torsion balance? How did lead spheres show the value of G? Is this because all objects on Earth are in the same gravitational well as the Earth? Oh, wait,
Where's the doc, Alan?
Yeah, good call. As I was finishing that sentence, I was like, I'm missing something. All right, here we go. 1 second.
Ooh, Occam's razor. This one sounds cool.
All right, here we go. You guys see that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Let me make sure it's on the right bit rate. Actually, I don't even have any settings, so I hope it's on the.
You're at 60 frame, 720.
It's locked in. I'm on. I can't adjust
That's fine.
it.
Go for it, man. I can read
All
it.
right.
Go.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's great.
Is it because all objects on Earth are in the same gravitational well, Shane? Is that why? As the Earth, and they will show the same value of big G. Michael Brenner. Cavendish did not determine big G, and the lead spheres did not show the value of G. In fact, the setup Cavendish used cannot be linked to gravity at all. Dude, how is this always the case? At all. Contrary to urban legends obstinately spreading this notion. When we are confronted with the measuring of a force per unit mass of 0.000007 newtons per kilogram using wires, ropes, and pulleys in the 1790s, leading to the value of 0.0000006 meters cubed per kilograms per squared, which in turn leads to the following pie chart. We should get our thinking caps on, or get our thinking caps off the hook and put them on for a while. So I'll zoom into the chart here. See that? So we got dark energy, dark matter, free hydrogen, stars, neutrinos, and heavy elements. So we got this pie chart here to represent all of that. An allegedly scientific inquiry resulting in declaring 97% of the universe being beyond scientific inquiry is tantamount to the declaration of being scientifically bankrupt. Man, what a wordsmith. 1 second, I'm going to hit some water here. All right. Because the Cavendish experiment is the fulcrum of this disastrous development, we need to have a real close look at how it went down, what it tried to accomplish, and what considerations were deliberately or ignored by ignorance or left out of the equations to get the amount that was aimed. The instrument used by Cavendish is the so-called torsion balance, where a deflecting force is brought into balance, one should think, with the torsion resistance of the wire. The deflecting force, F, the gravitational attraction between the two lead balls, is active on the load arm, L, resulting on torque, which is F times L, which needs to balance out with the torque of the torsion resistance, which is noted by K, acting via the deflection angle, theta. So K times theta equals F times L. We got a little diagram here to represent that. So the deflection angle based off of the mass, attracting mass, is going to be that. So they're taking the mass attracting mass and like redirecting it through to the wire or whatever to like balance it out. And then they're saying that just these masses here are attracting to each other, and that's represented by this angle. That's what we've all been told in all this thing. So we're gonna break that down. At equilibrium, when the balance has been stabilized at angle theta, the amount of torque must be 0, as these two sources of torque must cancel out. So K times theta equals F times L. Here we encounter the first big issue with the whole setup. Actually, the rod was never at rest. Cavendish had to measure the deflection angle of the rod while it was oscillating. Imagine buying a fish at the market and the vendor naming you its price while the spring balance is still swinging. You would call him a cheat and walk away. Yet we accept the number of Cavendish. We accept the number from Cavendish, which he derived from his balance that was swinging, i.e., not balanced. And it would never balance, which leads us next to the next big issue, the dampening. The twisting of the wire has to overcome friction, which is the prime dissipator of energy. Anything that is gravity driven has only a very limited amount of gravitational potential energy at its disposal to be dissipated, which would happen very soon. An oscillation that does not come to rest is not a gravity-driven oscillation. The experiment should therefore end right there in the dustbin. And then here we have a graph for that. So the amplitude and the time, so the oscillation over time. In engineering school, you learn something cosmologists obviously never do. To check your results against an educated guess and see if your results fall in the ballpark of what your experience and what your dead reckoning tells you is plausible. If it doesn't have to go back if it doesn't, you have to go back and check again. What is the Cavendish experiment trying to make us believe? What order of magnitude of force would lead two lead balls combined with 158.75 kilograms of mass exerted on each other? Would that force be able to twist a steel wire ad infinitum? And we have this here. What does it say?
That's ad infinitum, by the way.
Oh, ad infinitum. Thank you, sir. And then we have a feather falling in a vacuum, I'm assuming. So imagine a thin steel wire, insert a thin steel rod through the strands and balance it out. Then let the 400th part of the dune feather rest on the end of the rod. Does your intuition tell you that the rod will start swinging and not stop doing so? Or does your intuition tell you that the rod would not budge under the weight of one little strand of this feather? I think it's clear that intuition tells us what's going to happen here. Such a feather has a hard time displacing the air and fall in and fall in a gravitational acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. Yet we are to believe that the acceleration of 0.00000007 meters per second squared can displace the same density of air with balls of a combined area of 42 centimeters squared. Well, hardly. That's why hardly, and that's why real precision torsion balances are housed in vacuums. Cavendish's balance was not. One second, get some water. Cavendish determined the attraction between the lead spheres at right angles to the direction of gravity. By doing so, he could eliminate the considerations to the gravitational attraction of Earth, and deal solely with the attraction between the lead spheres, says Bill Hazelton. And this will show how sloppy the apologetic physics needs to be in order to hold up the nonsense results. The combined mass of the moving balls is 1.5 kilograms. Add that to the unaccounted for mass of the rod and the wire and multiply that by 9.8. That gives you a stretching force on the suspension wire, and the stretching forces change the resistance to twist by the increased friction. The consequence is that the experiment would give different results on the moon and give different results in null gravity points, again different results in a vacuum, etc., and in combination of all the above. So there can be no question of the universal constant being such an ill-conceived experiment, which leaves out the equation of all gravitational noise, as if for the lead balls would only be the masses in the universe. They aren't, and the basic tenet of gravitational theory is that all masses affect all masses in the universe with no shielding available. So the experiment is a wash in gravitational noise, which is totally unaccounted for, and that includes the church down the road as well. The old mass of the building. So, they actually tried to say that they weighed a mountain or something too, like off of a similar thing. They did one of these next to a mountain, and they're like, oh, no way, mountain gravity, right where we were looking for it, from this oscillating measurement. This is all purely procedural, and already we have the scientific freak show. Now, what about the math? Pure Copperfield, and we are sitting there oohing and eyeing and not looking, or oohing and eyeing and not looking closely because we have paid for the show and we might as well be impressed. It is claimed that for the balance of K times theta equals F times L, which we never saw balanced anyway, we can derive G via F by the way of F equals G times M over R squared, which follows to G equals F times R squared over little mass times big mass equals K times theta times R squared over L times little mass times big mass. Problem, because the problem here is that we have two unknowns, K and F. Therefore, the best we can hope for is that the equation gives us a relation to theta over L equals F over K equals question over question. That means that I get the same result for any F and any K as long as their ratio equals theta over L. And they're the Copperfield math. Dude, I'm so glad you picked this, Carice. And they're the David Copperfield mathematics get into the, what is this? Inattentive, gullible public, which includes placeholders and applied physicists.
Those are a PhD holder.
Oh, is that not what I said? What did I say? PhD.
You called them placeholders.
Oh, did I really?
It's kind of identical.
What's the
Yeah, my bad.
Freudian slip?
Yeah, the PhD holders and applied physicists by saying, "Oh, but we have a measure." Dude, that's sorry. I'm like, as I'm reading this, I'm rehashing all the Cavendish conversations I had with people that did this exact thing. It's actually kind of gratifying. Let's see. Oh, but we measured it with the oscillation period t, which gives us k, which then we have the value that we look for. Look, we found it. T is proportional to 2 pi times this. I'm just seeing it so. I'm just seeing it so clearly, dog. It's so crazy. Look, it's all proportional.
Look, exclamation point.
Right where we found it. So it's all proportional to the square of the mass and the length times the length squared over 2 times k. And boom, we're duped because we are not attentive enough to stand up and say, wait, you cannot derive an absolute value from an equation with 2 unknowns, because t can also be defined as t equals 2 pi times the square over mass times L times theta over 2 times F, and then you can get right back to the ratio theta over L. GG. You cannot define the torsion coefficient of the wire by the force you want to measure. You have to know one of them independently, and because the whole setup was meant to find F, Cavendish would need to present painstaking independent research into a torsion coefficients of wires, and especially the very wire that he used for the experiment, which didn't happen. Oh no, what, dude, they got coefficients for everything except for the old stress on the wire, huh? It's a little sus. See, the next step is the interpretation of the experiment, which so far has nothing to do but gives scientific and mathematical ghost train away. For the interpretation, Cavendish, or rather his successors, reach back 2,000 years ago and grab an arbitrary number derived from a similarly unscientific approach. Eratosthenes arbitrarily and without ever presenting results of the investigation into nature of the sun rays hitting the earth, postulated them to be parallel due to the assumed large distance of the sun, although he never observed parallel rays, as no one ever has. This arbitrary choice resulted in a speculative diameter of the Earth, which was plugged into the math for the Cavendish experiment, and came out to give Earth's density, which is rho equals 3 times g over 4 pi times r times g equals 5.4 grams per centimeter squared.
Yeah, 5.4 grams per cubic centimeter.
Oh, sorry, per cubic centimeter.
Density of Earth, right?
Ty. But we observe and measure the density of Earth to be 3 grams per cubic centimeter. Yeah, 3 grams per cubic centimeter. And right there, the discrepancy of 80% between the calculation and observation. What is the solution? Double checking the experiment? No. We invent an inaccessible and non-verifiable iron core to supply the missing mass. Oh, no way. And that just makes the discrepancy go away. Pretty much the same routine later when computations based on G lead to 97% discrepancy with that would be compensated for by the inaccessible and unverifiable dark energy and dark matter from Earth, or for the cosmological model. Dude, this is great. Okay. Now, what does the iron core mean? How does it fit into the gravity theory? It does not, because the childish notion of a heavy iron sinking into the center of a sphere is not gravity theory, it's gravity fantasy. Sinking in gravity theory means to be attracted, and attraction is a force per unit mass. The center of the sphere has an attraction of 0 g equals 0 f over m. Therefore, nothing voluntarily sinks to the center of the sphere. There is also no pressure in the center of the sphere, because pressure is force per unit area, and in a column of Earth 6,371 kilometers high does not press down on the center, because it does not weigh anything at the center. Weight is mass times gravitational acceleration, W equals m times g, and gravitational acceleration at the center of mass is 0. GG. Dude, a little shell theorem, dude. They're playing hide the center of mass in the math abstraction.
Just
I
throw
like
some
it.
berry center.
Perfect
Jiggle it
timing.
around, throw some berry center, you'll be fine.
Come back around here to Ether Cosmology on Tuesday, and you'll hear a little bit more about Newton's old shell theorem.
Oh, nice, dude. I can't wait. The whole thing's a shell theorem. Let's see, where are we at here? So if the mass on top of that is rotating, the postulated solid and therefore densest inner core floating in liquid and less dense, the outer core would not stay centered but be flung around by the centrifugal forces. For a mass where the resultant acceleration vector points is where down is, the solid iron core would therefore think down is the periphery and therefore sink towards the periphery, which is the crust, and not the center, where there's no acceleration vector, where no acceleration vector is pointed because the center has no acceleration. Newton's center of mass is a mere mathematical artifact, not attracting physical reality, and has no power to retain anything.
So maybe that's what's causing earthquakes. This big, giant, solid iron core just knocking around there inside. Just whoop-pow, whoop-pow, whoop-pow. And that's what's, shaking up all this shit going up here on the surface.
Get like a rock in the wire
that's
or
it.
whatever.
That's it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Dude. Yeah. It just works out magically, and it just spins in there, and it maintains its axis and all that. How dare you? Next is the fact that the rotating mass with a liquid core wobbles and quickly becomes a standstill, in contrast to a solid mass which doesn't and continues rotating much longer. Watch here under the quote-unquote cool science experiment. So this cool little science experiment alone tells us that the core of the rotating Earth cannot be liquid, but then it cannot be liquid for many other reasons too. And then here we have a nice little diagram I'll try and zoom into. Oops. All right, well, anyway. So we got your cross section of the old Earth there with the inner core.
And the Eratosthenosphere.
Ooh, the Eratosthenosphere. That's my favorite sphere. Okay, the reasons too. Imagine a peach with the interior speculated to be hotter than the surface of the sun, but a skin so cool you could hold it in your hands. The skin would be undoubtedly called the world's best insulator, silicate rock. The material of the crust is not the world's best insulator. On the contrary, it is an excellent heat conductor. The thermal conductivity is 100 times that of a wallboard made of 100 times that of a wallboard and 4 times that of concrete. To expect we can walk barefoot. To expect that we can walk barefoot on that skin of rock, on top of billions and billions of red hot lava, is pure nonsense, as the notion of volcanoes tap into that sea of lava, in which is speculated to be at a pressure of 1.4 million atmospheres, or million eratospheres.
That's Earth popping a zit.
Releasing the pressure from 1.4 million eratospheres of a communicating vessel would look differently. So obviously every volcano taps into its own limited and local supply of lava under very different kinds of pressure and is not connected to the fantasy liquid core of the spinning ball. Well said. This is all a result of one utterly unscientific, crude experiment claiming to give a result with the preposterous precision of e to the minus 11.
My favorite
Level of precision. I don't, honestly, if it's not e to the 11, like I don't even look at it. This trend of nonsense has been updated with LIGO. Shout out to Brenner. Where again, the most medieval mechanical setup, mere suspended on wires, are we supposed to give us results of the unfathomable precision of e to the minus 19. The flattest surface of mankind can produce The flattest surface mankind can produce is to the diameter of a lead atom, which is pretty flat as grinding goes, but it's still a million times too coarse for the signal obtained from an experiment awash in the vibrational noise of the microseismic Earth, where the amplitude of continuous shaking exceeds the signal by many orders of magnitude. Let's see here. Yeah, I
like that one.
They're about to wrap up here. Charles Babbage, in his book from whatever, Charles Babbage, 1792 to 1871, in his book Reflections on the Decline of the Science of England, describes in detail the methods of this corrupt scientific body. Trimming the smoothing of irregularities to make the data look extremely accurate and precise. Cooking, retaining only the results to fit the theory and discarding others. Forging, inventing, damn, shout out to your boy Babbage. Forging, inventing some or all of the researcher data and even reporting experiments to obtain the data that were never performed. Just lying, just make it up. The results of selfish dishonesty are near 100% ignorance about nature. Is a near 100% ignorance about nature, which is an impressive number in itself, but certainly not satisfying and certainly not scientific. The author of this diatribe is being dishonest, claiming to know more than he does. This is a clever argument. Well, it's actually not. It's like a proportional ratio that they use. So once they have the constant, like that's pretty much game over. Like that's, oh man. What an awesome read. Thank you for that.
Man, I forgot I ran into a comment thread earlier that I was like, man, I should just read this instead of the article. Like it was just him going back and forth with somebody, like being super thorough. His comments are just as good as the actual things he writes.
Oh yeah, dude. His replies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Replies, yeah. That one was really good.
Is that doc in chat?
It will be in about 2 seconds.
Yeah. I still
Anyone else
mine.
got one on deck?
Yep.
Nice.
I stole mine from Earth Awakenings, though.
Nice.
Oh, this file is too big. Give me 1
Centripetal
second.
Force.
How did you convert all these into docs? Did you just HTTP page save?
No, so there's a plugin that'll, like, when you go to print a page, it'll just turn it into a PDF, and it kind of like it works on most stuff, but on the core stuff, it's a little choppy, but it's good enough.
Yeah, and the Chorus stuff, what I do on the Chorus stuff is you have to right click on the top bar, the navigation bar, and hide the element or delete the element.
Oh, is that
So,
what
like,
you do?
right click on it, view element, and then you go and hover over it, and then find, like, it'll highlight it when you hover over that part of the code, and then you just click delete, and then print it to PDF, and it seems to fix it.
Cool.
Anyways.
No, TY for the heads up.
Dude, Centripetal Force. Yeah. Didn't you go over a little bit of that?
Awesome. Sounds great.
A little bit.
Where's it in
mine.
chat?
Yeah, that's a great piggyback off that one.
Oh, 1 second. I gotta put it on Ether cause for you. Go ahead, Shane.
Hey Shane, can you drop it from 1440 60 frames when we're just looking at it? PDF. Thanks, man.
Probably.
Yeah, come
I
on.
did get a new computer, but I guess I can lower myself for the benefit of everyone or whatever.
Only
I
read
feel like the
PDFs
guys
work
on
out.
that tilt-a-whirl right there.
Application, this, and then what? What do I choose? I mean, how do I bring
Do
you
like
shitty,
7/20/15.
Yep. Wow.
720/30. Come on, let's
Okay.
splurge.
Okay.
Splurge. Yeah, kick it.
Weekend, guys. All right, Centripetal. Let me get. Oh, I gotta bring it to my big screen. Is my Discord push to talk? No, right? You guys can hear me now.
Dude, that space bear centered in the middle of this mirror looks awesome.
Somebody's
sir.
echoing pretty bad there.
Hey, was that me or him?
That might be me.
Yeah, it's
So-
you, Toby.
Rocking with open mic, right? So it could have been me. Where the hell is? Oh, Edge. Right. So we got Centripetal and Centrifugal, I think. Let's see. Brenner. So we have. Why is Centripetal Force not a real force? Oh, this is going to be great. So that's a question that's at least pointing in the right direction for once. Usually it's Centrifugal Force that is associated.
Yo, can
with magnetic
you
field.
share? It's not on the Discord.
It's not. Didn't.
Shared the wrong window. We're looking at an infinite reflection.
Oh, that's gay. Hold on. Stop.
Yeah.
And this side. Wait. 7, 20, 30. Okay. Yeah, we good?
Yep, solid.
Cool. So let's see. But the question about forces is not about being real or not being real. Forces must be real or they can't be called forces. Introduction of pseudo force or fictitious force is the same as introducing angles, entities that effectuate something without being corporeal. But Newton mechanics is based on corporeal, that is, mass having entities. Without mass, no force. Now, if we look at how mathematicians treat that problem, we see that they fully remain in their domain of mathematics, which is geometry and kinematics, and never ever venture out into the world of dynamics. They go so far as to postulate these differences do not exist and are made up by me. I kid you not. Professor Torsten Heel here, just on Quora, does this every time it is mentioned. Just to remind everybody that this is not the case here are the respective definitions picked straight from the Oxford Dictionary. Geometry, the branch of mathematics concerned with the properties and relations of points, lines, surfaces, and solids. Kinematics, the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of objects without reference to the forces which cause the motion. Dynamics, the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of bodies under the action of forces. I like that breakdown.
It's a great breakdown.
So if we look at the derivation of centripetal acceleration, we see that it's pure geometry in massless points in motion, but never is the effect of having mass introduced, demonstrated, calculated, or derived. Simply multiplying the derived acceleration with mass will not do. You have to investigate what this mass wants to do. In the words of R. Feynman, one might sit in an armchair all day long and define words at will, but to find out what happens when two balls push against each other or when a weight is hung on a spring is another matter altogether, because the way the bodies behave is something completely outside any choice of definitions. And here, besides the above-mentioned domains of validity, there is another crucial aspect of physical reality, that is, of real masses as opposed to theoretical points, an aspect which is regularly neglected, that is the aspect of degrees of freedom. Something that has no degree of freedom cannot push you. When you lean against the house, does the house push you or do you push the house? The situation is not symmetrical because if the house would disappear, you'd fall flat on your nose. Would you disappear, the house wouldn't notice. A popular example for the obfuscation around the notion of centripetal force is the gravity fair-round ride. Here it is claimed that the spinning structure is applying a centripetal force onto you, and that's all there is to it. But the structure is rigid in the centripetal direction and can thus not push you. It is you who tries to push the rigid structure out of your way, and if the structure is not strong enough, you break through in a direction away from the center. Not the structure collapses toward the center, which would be the case would a centripetal force be acting. Or if the hammer thrower wants to persuade the ball to go in a circle around him, he has to overcome the innate power of resistance of the ball to do so. Again, the leash is a rigid structure which cannot pull the ball. It is the ball which has the necessary degree of freedom to stretch the leash. And if the leash would be somewhat flexible, the length of the leash would increase. It would stretch, which is a clear sign of what is active here is a centrifugal force applied by the ball, not contracting centripetal force by the leash. The inertia of the ball is the force. That is the fundamental Newton definition of force, and mainstream just wants to obfuscate this because the Newtonian cosmology would collapse under the weight of centrifugal reality. The proverbial, what does he say? The proverbial hits the fan of reality when it comes to orbits. The mere notion of centrifugal forces demolishes all hopes for them to work in reality. Therefore, they must be labeled fictitious, pseudo, and unreal. Look at the emphasis in this cartoon presented here in the answers by P. Canal. So it says, centrifugal force. The red object will make this turn only if there is enough friction on it. Otherwise, it goes straight. The apparent outward force is called the centrifugal force. It is not real. An object will not move in a circle until something makes it. And then he has object on the dashboard and object straight. Immediately under the emphasized message comes the contradiction, because Newton's mechanics, after all, an object will not move in a circle until something makes it. In the case illustrated here, it would be the friction between red and yellow object. Would you want the red mass to follow the yellow one in sync, you would have to tune the friction accordingly. And how would you do that? You would ask the red mass what it intends to do, which means you would ask what force it would mount against your intention to make it go around the curve. And that force is the centrifugal force, the origin of all forces. This force can be everything between 0 and infinite, depending on how much time you give it. Infinite time means 0 resistance because 0 displacement, and no time means infinite resistance. Even a sand grain contains a potential of infinite force if you want to accelerate it in no time. That means mass is the seat and origin of all mechanic forces, and that means centrifugal force is the original source of force. Centripetal is what you have to come up with to restrain a mass from disobeying your intentions, with the force, of course, or whatever. Nothing of this appears in the derivations of centripetal acceleration mathematicians present, because they live and move in a domain that does not know masses and their behavior. No one could express that better than the inimitable Richard Feynman. And the quote says, there's a very important thing that a lot of people who come from mathematics don't appreciate. That physics is not mathematics and mathematics is not physics. One helps the other, but you have to have some understanding of the connection of the words within the real world. And this is a problem which is not a problem of mathematics at all. He also explains why it is practically impossible to have a reasonable conversation about physical reality with a mathematician. The mathematicians only are dealing with the structure of the reasoning, and they do not really care about what they are talking. They don't even need to know what they're talking about. That sounds familiar. Or is they themselves, whether they say is true. Okay. I think Robert Bennett comes to mind talking about this with relations to physics, actually, physicists and mathematicians. And here, an excellent example from real life would wonderfully illustrate what Feynman says here. I had endless discussions with T. Hale, Jan Quora, about torque and what is mathematically versus what it is physically. You see, mathematicians are so far removed from reality, and accordingly from reasoning and rooted in reality, that they cannot, for instance, compute that two vectors pointing geographically in opposite directions might actually add up, or two vectors pointing geographically in the same direction might actually subtract. If the hub of a rotation lies between them, they need to introduce a mathematical language that allows the mathematician to add and subtract without judgment, because what mathematics can't do is judge. It has to go like on rails. It must be like a force mate in 3, for instance. Physically, torque is a tangential force multiplied by the scalar of a distance to hub. That's it. It'll always remain a tangential force, never will it physically turn 90 degrees and come out of the axis through the hub, which is what mathematicians have to do in order to be able to add and subtract without making a judgment. The fact that the right-hand rule was completely arbitrary without any motivation stemming from physical reality tells us that this is an artificial artifact only introduced to make math work, not to represent physical reality. And the right-hand rule for torque, meaning that the torque is in the direction along the axis of the spin of the angular velocity, which would be produced by it. It looks like it's to the left of the grasping hand of the torque direction. And it says on the right, it says T equals the rate of the force of sine of theta. If the fingers of the right hand are curried from the direction of R towards the direction of F, then the thumb points in the direction of torque. Okay. Because now with this trick, you can turn two vectors pointing geographically in the same direction into two vectors pointing geographically in opposite directions. And now you, the mathematician, can add and subtract without making a judgment. You just follow a rule. That would not be possible mathematically if the judgment of the mathematician would be part of the routine, as Hale the mathematician demonstrated when he, with a big brouhaha, condescendingly deemed that I was claiming these tau vectors would add up, when in fact they of course subtract because they want to turn the wheel in opposite directions. T1 here is less than T2, and that looks like a proportionate visually scaled arrow here. It's almost as if mathematicians don't see the hub because it's not painted in here and remain utterly lost without an arbitrary right-hand rule. Bottom line, in physics, nothing happens along the axis of a wheel when you turn it. The mathematical treatment of torque is just a fluke of grammar like any language has, in this case, the language of math. You wouldn't claim that a particular grammar rule of English or French represents something physically real, would you? And in answering the question at hand, centripetal is a real force, all but a secondary emergent one, mirroring the real force, which is inertia. Forces only come in the quality real because they are defined through mass, and masses cannot be unreal, contrary to what scientific methodology in the absence of empirical data will tell you when they introduce virtual matter and virtual photons. And I kid you not that the above was the subtitle of a prestigious science symposium in Munich. Good old alchemy had alchemy said the same thing, had a closer relation to experimental physics than these guys. Richard Dawid, non-empirical confirmation, by Simo Pigalusi, post-empirical physics, falsificationism, and the public perception of science. Falsificationism, huh? Radian Dardashti, physics without experiments, Peter Kinstein, scientific speculation, the panel with Stephen Hartman, why trust the theory, He says, what does all this tell us? That your intellect is your only protection against mathematical trickery, and you have to hone your rationale and tend to your logical glands, lest they wither under the lack of rain in the modern parks environment. What a story, man.
Nice
Damn.
closing there, especially. That's some gross, man.
Let's end in
That was a good
poetry.
one as well.
We're going around again. Push that one has one.
Yeah, it's posted up in the live chat.
Oh, you don't want to read it?
Oh, sure, I can read it. I'm just waiting people, if anybody wants to download it, they can read along on their screen or not, your choice.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
let me just
right.
bring it up.
Yeah, I got you. I'll post it for, or as you're reading, I'll highlight along for everyone. Or unless you want to do it, Shane, you're already streaming.
Yeah, give me it. Where is it?
You put it in the,
It's in the
live chat. Yep.
It's a PDF.
Okay.
Yep. It's at 9:11 past the hour.
All right. Boom, 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 boom. Cool. Orbital Mechanics, is that the other one? Or was that mine? Where'd the PDF go?
That's yours. No, it's Occam's razor. That's it right on top.
Yep. Do I have a PDF reader? Yes. Okay.
Okay.
It's a brand new computer. I have this one. Now I got to switch windows.
Just open it in terminal.
I can talk too if you like.
No, I got it. I just had to switch to a PDF now. Put this on chained window PDF. Cool. We good.
All right, looking good. What is Occam's razor? Let me get up on mine here too. How is it used in physics and cosmology? What are some examples of its application? That's where we're headed, folks. All right, Occam's razor is, in a sense, the opposite of a Rube Goldberg machine, which tries to find the longest, most unreasonable, most unlikely, yet still physically working path to achieve a goal. So check out the image on the next page there. I love how he stole it from Alamy. That's fabulous. Okay, Occam's razor, on the other hand, is an approach that starts with the assumption that nature tries to find the most direct, reasonable, least complicated way, a way that demands the least explanatory excursions into the improbable to find an explanation. Like with the scientific method, most people just assume without questioning that scientists have ingrained this principle as second nature in order to prevent science from ending up in a quagmire of irrationalities, improbabilities, in a world of the pseudo, the fictitious, the virtual, the imaginary, and finally, the contradictory, the absurd, and the magic. As in the case of the scientific method, these people are plain wrong because science as of 2022 is all of the above.
Right?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter which department of science we step into, we'll find the same game played everywhere. A game confirming a Rube Goldberg universe instead of a universe cut with Occam's razor. Whoosh. Funny coincidence, Barry Goldberg here gives a good example of Occam's razor. If you hear the sound of hoofs in Central Park, think horses, not zebras. This can be directly applied to cosmology, and it makes you instantly a better cosmologist than all others out there, as well as folks here on Quora who never get anywhere close to such a sharp tool. When I was reading that the first time, I thought he was going to mention that sharp tools are just not safe in the hands of people who read Quora. But anyways, in cosmology, comparable to hearing hoofs in Central Park, is finding short-lived elements like promethium in a star. Welcome to that's Przybylski's star HD 101065. Promethium, which follows neodymium in the periodic table, has no stable isotope and therefore must be absent in the spectrum. Okay, it's not. We see it like you see a zebra while still being persuaded that we're in Central Park. And there could be an argument made that because there's a zoo, maybe they had one and it escaped. But then, when we also see sloths, funnel-eared bats, vaquitas, saulas, kakapos, and goby bear, then we have to take out Occam's razor, cut loose the idea that we're in Central Park, and re-examine the totality of our position in a different environment than previously assumed. In the case of Przybylski star, we also see technetium, polonium, actinium, protactinium, neptunium, plutonium, americium is what it should be, curium, berkelium, californium, and einsteinium, which have no business to be in Central Park, that is, in a star like HD 1065, in the theoretical environment of our cosmological model. That's a mouthful. Now imagine a science community that instead of concluding that we're not in Central Park, insists that we are in fact in Central Park, that is, in the cosmos as described by the standard model, coming up with a Rube Goldberg explanation why all these exotic and rare animals would pop up there anyways. This is exactly what happened, and the result could be hilariously funny if it wouldn't also be so devastatingly detrimental to real knowledge and progress when you ignore Occam's razor. Daily Galaxy, November 2020. Advanced civilizations might use stars to store nuclear waste, a notion broached by Daniel Whitmire and David Wright as far back as 1980, and considered as well by Carl Sagan and Joseph Slavotsky in their Intelligent Life in the Universe. Whitmire and Wright even opined that the most likely stars in which we would find such pollution were late A stars like Przybylski's star. Not all astronomers were happy with being associated with these outlandish ideas about aliens dumping garbage in stars, so another solution was found, one that looked a little less like a Rube Goldberg idea, but still, if you want to explain the sighting of a vaquita and a kakapo in Central Park, it's gonna contain some magic. There's reason to believe, though, that there might be longer-lived elements higher up in the table in an island of stability that experimenters have yet to reach. This is a region of the table of the isotopes that might have unusually stable members because they contain a magic number of neutrinos and protons. Wicca, believe it or not, on this topic reads like a Greek mythology. Because of the odd properties of this star, there are numerous hypotheses about why the oddities occur. One such theory is that the star contains some long-lived nuclides from the island of stability, and that observed short-lived actinides are the daughters of these progenitors occurring in secular equilibrium with their parents. That's kinky. Okay, don't go there, children. Don't go there. And here we go again. Like with dark matter and dark energy, now we need a magic island of stability, which nobody has seen yet to explain what we observe, but admitting that the standard model failed and letting go of it is absolutely out of the question. But let's face it, if you have let cosmology get to a point where you have to invoke aliens or magic islands in order to save it, then you've gone way too long without employing Occam's razor. And that is exactly what happened. Dumping trash into stars is the end of the line. The beginning is the star formation itself. And here we find another Rube Goldberg construction. When James Jean tried to explain that Kant nebula hypothesis, the brainchild of a philosopher of ethics, mind you, he was similarly confronted with the task of explaining a great funnel-eared bat in Central Park, and the solution was as expected hilarious, so much so that it was immediately called Jean's swindle. The principal difficulty lies in finding a system which shall satisfy the ordinary gas equations and shall at the same time give an adequate representation of the primitive nebula of astronomy. If we begin by supposing a nebula to consist of a gas which satisfies at every point the ordinarily assumed gas equations and to be free from the influence of all external forces, then the only configuration of equilibrium is one which extends an infinite distance and is such that the nebula contains an infinite amount of gas. That is a profound statement, guys. Go revisit that someday on a slow day. That is something. That means
infinite Batman.
It's crazy. That means there cannot be a finite cloud of gas wafting through space, as any gas will fill the available volume uniformly. And if it has to fill an infinite space uniformly, then it needs to be of infinite quantity. That means thermodynamics precludes the universe as proposed by, without a U, by the standard model. He continues, The difficulty could be avoided by supposing that the nebula is of infinite size and that equilibrium is maintained by a constant pressure applied to the outer surface of the nebula. If this pressure is so great that the density of gas at the outer surface is sufficiently large to justify us in supposing that the gas equations are satisfied everywhere inside this surface, then the difficulty in question will have been removed. Supposed, next, that the matter outside S consists mainly of molecules or of masses of matter which are describing hyperbolic or parabolic orbits, or which come from infinity, and after rebounding from the nebula, return to infinity. Read that again and let it sink in. Here, magic molecules, which obviously do not belong to the universe and come from infinity and return to infinity after having applied the necessary pressure to a cloud, which is in itself a nonsense proposition, as you cannot pressurize a gas with molecules, you need a surface. P equals FA, F over A rather, and gases ain't doing surfaces. Here, the principle of Occam's razor clearly would tell us that if you have to invoke mysterious particles that come from nowhere and return to nowhere after they delivered an otherwise non-existent parameter, then your model is a Rube Goldberg model and not science. Fritz Zwicky should have pulled out his razor when he discovered that galaxies do not follow the law of universal gravitation without invoking an unphysical, scientifically inaccessible kind of matter. Chandrasekhar should have pulled out Occam's razor when redshift starting demanding a mysterious and scientifically inaccessible kind of energy. And on, all the way down to geology and biology, we are presented with a magnificent Rube Goldberg Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus kind of reality where the existence of hippopotami bones in England is explained by the father of geology, Charles Lyell, as follows. Geologists may freely speculate on the time when herds of hippopotami issued from North African rivers such as the Nile and swam northward in summer along the coasts of the Mediterranean, or even occasionally visited the islands near the shore. Here and there they may have landed to graze or browse, tarrying a while, and afterward continuing their course northward. Others may have swum in a few summer days from rivers in the south of Spain or France to the Somme, Thames, or Severn, making timely retreat to the south before snow and ice set in. People who propose such quackadoodle nonsense have never heard of Occam's razor and would certainly not touch it if they had, and a society that elevates such people to the position of father of have obviously totally lost sight of what is reasonable. Neutrinos, for instance, are not reasonable. When a neutron decays into a proton and an electron, there is some energy missing. Whoopsie! And because we cling to the dogma of conservation of energy, we need to make good for the missing energy with something, and that something has been called a neutrino. More and more experiments found tiny amounts of energy missing. And these were all called some kind of neutrino, like the muon neutrino and then the tau neutrino. Then when that was not enough, something more exotic was invented, the shape-shifting oscillating neutrino, a neutrino that changes flavor in transit. Yummy. So you don't recognize it anymore, and the next generations of neutrinos are already programmed under the title of sterile neutrinos. And as the saying goes in these circles, neutrino physics is learning a lot from seeing nothing. Well, if that were the case, that would be great. Wolfgang Pauli was skeptical from the beginning, and so were many others. But doubts are not the stuff Nobel Prizes are made of, especially not doubts in fundamental assumptions like conservation of energy. Pauli admitted, just saying.
Like we observe dark matter, or we don't. We learn a lot from that. I was like, whoa, I need to get out of here.
Pauli admitted that his neutrino proposal was an act of desperation, not discovery. I have done a terrible thing. I have replaced something that could not be understood with something that could not be observed. Neutrinos are a negative science. You give something that is missing a name without explaining why it's missing and what it is. Neutrinos are missing energy. E neutrinos, missing energy. Tau neutrino, missing energy. Neutrino oscillations, missing energy. It was Niels Bohr who had the fortitude to suggest that the energy conservation could be violated, but did not pursue that idea because it was deemed suicide for physics. But as it turns out, not applying Occam's razor led to intellectual agony instead. We know that energy is not a fixed quantity in the universe. It is time the derivative of electrification of the ether, W equals Q over T. That means it can be produced, and thus it can go missing. The experiments confirming neutrinos' existence all fall under one or more of the categories described by Charles Babbage in his 1830 Reflections on the Decline of Science in England. And this is exactly the one that Alan just read out about trimming, cooking, and forging. Notice, he loves that little quote. Nature is simple and straightforward. When people like Suskind tell you nature is ugly and convoluted, and that we need to replace common sense with uncommon sense, out comes Occam's razor and zap. Postscript. Predictably, some of the readers, but especially T. Heil, found offense in this post, so much that he reported it as factually wrong without saying where, what, and why. Therefore, hear a Feynman lecture where he talks about scientific method and why theories can never known to be right, but always known to be wrong. In this lecture, Feynman shows that being aware of how science should work is not the same as actually doing science when a Nobel is in the offing. At 34 seconds in, if it disagrees with the experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with the experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it. Excuse me. Feynman was a theoretical physicist, an oxymoron if there ever was one, and so his experiment was mathematics. When mathematics blows up in your face, then the experiment has failed and the theory is simply wrong, as per his own words here. So it happened with quantum electrodynamics, where mathematics consistently blew up in their faces. But what was the consequence? A method of ignoring a failed experiment. You okay there? I seem to have lost you.
No, we're good. Well,
You're good? Okay, a method of ignoring a failed experiment, was introduced under the thinly disguised title of renormalization. That means whenever an equation explodes into infinity, you just brush the shards under the carpet and continue as if nothing has happened. Here, Feynman on renormalization. Yeah, you got it right there now. But no matter how clever the word, it is what I call a dippy process. Having to resort to such a hocus pocus has prevented us from proving that the theory of quantum electrodynamics is mathematically self-consistent. I suspect that renormalization is not mathematically legitimate. But the lure of a Nobel Prize is just too great, and so Feynman caved in and collected the coveted prize, 1965, for what he called a dippy process. 4 minutes and 1 second. We can always prove any definite theory wrong. Notice, however, we never prove it right. At 5 minutes and 9 seconds, I must also point out to you that you cannot prove a vague theory wrong. If the guess that you make is poorly expressed and rather vague, and the method that you use for figuring out the consequence is rather a little vague, you're not sure. I mean, you say, I think everything's because it's all due to muggles, and muggles do this and that, more or less, so I can sort of explain how this works. Then you say that that theory is good because it can't be proven wrong. This, of course, exactly what I was talking about here. If all kinds of muggles can be invoked, that can never be seen directly, then we are all in Alice's Wonderland and not in a scientific environment. 533. If the process of computing the consequences is indefinite, then with a little skill, any experimental result can be made to look like an expected consequence. That is exactly how neutrino physics works, how dark matter and dark energy physics works, CERN works, how quantum electrodynamics works. So Heil is factually wrong when he claims he is factually right, because as we just heard, that is not the case in the best of cases. But with neutrinos, which are just placeholders for missing stuff, which is only missing because of a dogmatic premise that it is held, immune to Occam's razor. It is more than a dippy process. Modern science, as represented most vociferously here by Hale, has gone down the only road forbidden to science, and that is presenting herself as a repository of truth, persecuting and reporting everyone who challenges the practices and results of vague theories and opaque experiments, which leads to the present sad state of science in the absence of empirical data. Yes. Experiments nowadays are huge collaborations where no one takes responsibility. Data are not published. Huge test facilities make it a monopoly, the contraindication to science who needs to be independently repeatable. And the sequence of prediction and confirmation is often reversed. New predictions are introduced after new experimental data are available, which easily makes a theory the best confirmed theory in history. If anyone or anything should be reported to a truly independent committee, then it is modern practices of science. Oh, yeah.
So, like, is he talking about relativity, which can simultaneously be the dumbest, stupidest theory and also the most proven correct theory ever, or whatever?
Every last theory that lacks a shred of empirical evidence. That's what he's talking about. Every last one of them.
Oh,
Dude,
Here endeth the lesson.
what a great read.
so you should be like a narrator or something. You put like so much energy into it. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you much. I actually have done a little bit of voiceover work here and there, and I'm available
Nice.
for parties.
Nice. Well, anyone else want to read one?
What do we got here?
Anyone else bring one to read? I can pull another one out.
Each
Yeah,
one is
who
kind
wants
of like
to follow
a
that, hey?
Dude, you're a tough
That was
act to
great.
follow, dude.
I'll take one for the team.
I hope you guys keep going for a little bit because I
Yeah.
do want to read one, but I have a meeting here in a minute.
Yeah, we got you, dogs. Soften them up, Toby, and then I'll hop in to further drag it out a little bit.
Kick ass. Yeah, kick ass.
The one I had was maybe, let me actually change to. Let's do this one. All right.
Yeah. So Alan, you turned into from a toroidal space bear to a ninja bear. So what's happening?
You added a blue bandana for posterity or whatever.
Yeah, I just added it for continuity, so we're good.
Look like a space ninja bear now. It's pretty badass.
Well,
All right,
if you were to ask me if you were to ask me, Alan, do you have over 150 AI generated bear pictures wearing a suit of armor and a blue bandana? I would say that the answer is I have a non-zero amount. That's all I have to say about that.
Enough said.
All right. So, given two masses that have gravitational potential energy between them, where is the gravitational potential energy stored? Ever since Newton decided not to investigate gravity, so far I've explained the phenomena by the force of gravity, but I have not yet ascertained the cause of gravity itself. We have been left with a descriptive mathematical interpretation only. There is no model of the theory of gravitation today other than the mathematical form, Feynman. All words used to talk about this phenomena have the quality of bedtime stories without reference to actual physics species responsible for the observed effect. Here in the answers, we find NASA scientists, PhD students, and holders and other scientists telling stories which all either violate one or more fundamental laws of physics or are not related to physics at all. They are not to blame, though, because the science of gravity is an incomprehensible deference to Newton. In an incomprehensible deference to Newton, has refused to advance into the Faradayan epoch of knowledge. First step towards accomplishing that transition is to acknowledge that Newton was simply wrong in calling gravity a force. Newton himself defined force as an overcoming of resistance to being set in motion or change in state of motion, and objects do not resist to being set in falling motion. Gravity consequently cannot be called a force. Second step is to abandon the stubborn but totally uncalled for separation between magnetism and gravity. The difference is like the difference between a 5-watt light bulb and a 5-watt laser. One is a nuisance at worst. The other is frying your retina or cutting wood. Nobody would say bulb and laser are different physical species, but they are different modalities of the same species. If gravity is the bulb, magnetism is the laser. Once we have freed us, or once we have freed of, once we have freed us of these prehistoric superstitions, to paraphrase C.P. Steinmetz, we can move on and step into the era of Faraday, i.e., the era of induction physics. In order to move freely in this era, we have to make a third step, and that is letting go of Einstein, the 20th century reincarnation of Newton, essentially his devastating 1905 paper with its abolishment of the ether. Ironically, Einstein himself is the best help in that effort. In 1905, I was of the opinion that I was no longer allowed to speak about the ether in physics. This opinion, however, was too radical, and as we shall later see when we discuss the theory of general relativity, it does remain allowed, as always, to introduce a medium filling all space and to assume that the electromagnetic fields and matter as well are its states. Once again, empty space appears as endowed with physical properties, i.e., no longer as physically empty, as seemed to be the case according to general or special relativity. One can thus say that ether is resurrected in the general theory of relativity, since the new theory, metric facts can no longer be separated from the true physical facts of the concepts of space and ether have merged together. And that was quoted from Ludwig Castro, Einstein and the Ether, 2000. And thus, we may in good conscience continue here where J.C. Maxwell left us. The medium of propagation, the ether, must exist. This medium must be a prominent thought in our investigations. With the ether reestablished as a prominent thought, we can finally paint the full picture of nature and begin to understand what was beyond the reach of both Newton and Einstein. The fundamental event in nature is the polarization of the ether, also called the electrification of the ether. It is important to understand that the ether as essence has no extension and no duration. That is, ether is not pervading space as substance. Ether is only one modality of the polarization, the other being counter space. Both space and time are side effects of the polarization between magnetism and dielectricity, being spatial divergence and counterspatial acceleration. Time and space. It is not nature which imposes them upon us. It is we who impose them upon nature because we find them convenient. Poincaré. It is crucial to wrap your mind around the concept of counter space, or rather anti-volume. We are used to associate capacity with volume and would automatically think that anti-volume is the opposite of having capacity. But that is misguided. Anti-volume has also capacity. It is the storage, quote-unquote, container for dielectricity, whereas volume is the storage, quote-unquote, container for magnetism. The closer the two plates are, the more counter space, the more storage of dielectricity, capacitor. The wider apart the plates, the more space and more storage of magnetism. If you are patient enough to observe cross-country power lines, you will recognize amperage spikes, dielectricity, by the rapprochement of the lines, increasing counter space and thus storage capacity for dielectricity, i.e. capacitance, and voltage spikes, magnetism, by divergent lines, or by divergence of lines, increasing space and thus storage capacity for magnetism, i.e. inductance. This is the basic concept. The event of polarization itself plays out dynamically as toroidal, precessional, hypertrichoidal reciprocation. It can be seen live in a ferrocell. Spatial extension is tantamount to loss of inertia, and what we call mutual attraction is the opposite, regaining inertia by loss of spatial extension. It is therefore not correct to say that masses and magnets attract each other. They follow the loss of spatial extension between them as space collapses into counter space in an attempt to retain inertia. Inertia is rest, and that is what the old philosophers understood as the driving motivation behind the behavior of matter, seeking out the place of ultimate rest, which they can find wherever they need, i.e. counter space, is incommensurable, not having a Cartesian location. Here, between two masses, two great dark spots, there opens up, quote unquote, a gateway to counter space, smaller dark spot, into which space from both sides collapses, and the masses are just following. Counterspatial acceleration, thus, is acceleration of space, Faraday, not objects accelerating through space, as Newton would say. That is why they are not resisting. Falling is just following. Now that we have seen the toroidal hypertrochoidal nature of space, we can see how separating masses acts as torsion, and that is where potential energy is stored, not as negative energy in a gravitational field, of which there is neither the one nor the other. Reifying the concepts of space and time, lumping them together and having them bent like a wet noodle will in future history books be considered one of the greatest intellectual blunders in the record of mankind. So if you want to be on the right side of history, that's what you have to throw overboard immediately. Let Louis Assin, the man who gave us the cesium atomic clock with which he made all the relevant experiments, help with this. Or Louis Assin, I don't know who that is. In any
Louis
case,
Assin, the man who made the atomic clock. And
okay,
yeah,
well, I meant more particularly the pronunciation.
gotcha.
But okay, there is no question here of a physical theory, but simply of a new system of units in which c is constant, and length and time do not have constant units, but have units that vary with v squared over c squared. Thus, they are no longer independent, and space and time are intermixed by definition and not as a result of some peculiar property of nature. Ooh.
Great breakdown, huh?
That's a great little sentence right there, man. Because some people get really tripped up on that exact thing.
They're changing the ruler.
Yeah. Well, some people they think like, oh, it's like God's number, like the speed of light. It's just like a mystical thing that like has been like planted in nature. And when we go and we find out that E equals mc squared, it's just because it's just this magical coincidence that shows that Einstein is so right. But that's never been meaningfully substantiated, and so it's not just the result of some peculiar property of nature. That's just it's just all theoretical, conceptual. It's just a temporal dimension, which is just an abstract dimension. Don't mistake it with a geometric dimension. So anyways, if the theory of relativity is regarded simply as a new system of units, it can be made consistent, but it serves no useful purpose. That was from Mr. Louis Assin from Electronics and Wireless World. Here in the same text, Assin shows what happens if you base science on, quote, thought experiments, quote unquote, rather than real-world experimental setups. He concluded at the end of the journey that the time required by the moving clock was less than that recorded by the stationary clock. The result did not follow from the experiment, but was simply an assumption slipped in implicitly during the complicated procedure. Second on the list of greatest blunders is the concept of particles, atomism, as it were, especially the concept of particles imparting negative momentum, quote unquote, as would be the case with gravitons. Atoms are
Bezos'
dynamos.
favorite.
Yeah, he loves talking about gravitons. It's true. Pardon me. Atoms are dynamos of toroidal precessional hypertrochoidal reciprocation, not point masses with mostly empty space in between. And in an extension of that principle, that is what the universe at large is. Not a thing that has a beginning, Big Bang, makes a journey through time, entropy, and it arrives at an end, heat death. But an event that can constantly reinvents itself in the polarization of the primordial ether, which has no extension and duration in and of itself, these being only attributes of magnetic divergence and dielectric acceleration. Thinking in terms of age and size in a universe driven by gravity, therefore, will leave you forever spinning meaninglessly in a back eddy of a stream of knowledge and consciousness. Speaking of consciousness, sit back, close your eyes, and try to feel the extension and duration of your consciousness. You will find it has neither, you'll find it has neither, and in realizing, you will find that you yourself are a product of the polarization of the ether, with your body, animus, as a spatially divergent loss of inertial and energy, and your consciousness, anima, the incommensurable seat of rest and source of energy.
Sprinkled some
Wow.
mystic sounding stuff in there at the end.
Yeah, it was interesting at the ending there. Okay. Anyone else got one?
I thought Alan was going to do one to drag out the time. I have a meeting I'm going into right now.
Yeah, I got you. Give me 1 second.
He's saying space doesn't exist. He's saying like space itself doesn't exist. Ether creates space.
Yeah. Well, dude, what Stone read about them like inferring nothing from everything, or like learning stuff from nothing. Like I was in that space with Wissett and that astronomer guy just a little while ago, and they literally said all of that. They were like, "What do you think about dark matter?" Oh, we learned so much about what we can calculate with it and non-existent formulas. I was like, "Oh my god."
Talking about the one with that autistic 16-year-old like tried to
Yeah.
So-
Dude, I followed you in there, PZO, so I blame me for everything that happened.
Look at that desktop.
Oh, what's up, dude? Is that new desktop? We got the bear, we got a smoke alarm, and we got a cybernetic penguin. Very cool.
What's the
Very
smoke
cool.
alarm for?
I mean, dog, we all know what the smoke alarm's for, and we're very thankful it got a battery.
Wait a second. What can you hear now? What's going on?
Nothing.
Oh,
Now we hear hopefully a safe and healthy Shane, not one that's just been torn off the wall with the battery ripped out and never to be heard again.
that was
we-
just no showers or whatever.
Shane's the smoke alarm?
I
Yes.
think so, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I don't need one. Right?
Right.
Hilarious.
So we can do, has relativity theory ever been questioned, or has Einstein's relativity theory ever been proven? I'll let the
What about the
panel
equals MC
decide.
squared one?
Oh, where's that? Do I have that one?
I can redrop it.
Yeah, drop it real
I
quick.
mean, if you want to read it, I just
Yeah. Sure. It's super relly. So, absolutely.
Give me 1 second here.
Dude, I just wish there was somewhere I could go to download a bunch of Brenner comps. Like, I wish someone took the time to like categorize. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, too bad. Like no one ever did.
Almost time to get him in here.
Yeah, if he's not here, it's never been done. So
Oh, there it is. Cool.
Yeah.
I just dropped it, but it's not. Let me print it.
Oh, that's fine. I can just read it from the website.
Has anybody reached out to him on Quora?
Dude, like what about like, we're text reading snobs? Like I can only read it if it's in PDF form.
yes, people.
But
Well, it's
but
nice
yes.
for people that want to follow along.
Well, I got it. I
guess.
can just pull it up. Oh, you
Cool.
mean
He'd
like
be
for the
dope.
yeah?
So I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
It's
I'm
fine.
sorry, bro.
What's
I was
up?
saying he'd be dope to get in here, right? Like if we got him on a stream. we
We're
make a
trying.
video.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, real quick, just to make sure I don't forget, if you happen to be listening, Mr. Brenner, because I do know you've listened to some of our work, especially when we've read your work, maybe we could try and schedule another one of these next time at an alternate time when you could slip in if you want. Or just, feel free to respond here on Discord. Maybe I'll reach out again in your Quora comments. But in any case, more important than any of that, thank you. If you're listening, thanks for all this insanely amazing work. As you can tell, we are very enthusiastic about it and can't say thank you enough for the amount of work you've poured into these answers.
Fighting scientism with the best of them, man. I love it.
Gentleman and a scholar, it appears. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love to, It'd be nice to pick his brain.
Yep.
Real.
Absolutely.
Although no pressure or whatever.
No pressure. All right, so go ahead and read this. So how did Einstein come up with the equation E equals mc squared, and how did he prove it? By Michael Brenner. It's about time. It's about time to grow up and leave behind the adolescent fantasy that is E equals MC squared. Quote,
At the start.
diminishes as a result of the emission of light, end quote. These are the words of Einstein himself, which immediately annihilate the mystic mantra that is E equals MC squared, because light is not emitted. Light is the process of something and not the propagation through something. Ooh, very nice. Sorry, my mouse wheel's a little... Okay, so then what we got here, ask any physicist and he will tell you right away that he has no idea what energy really is. Likewise, what mass is and what magnetism and gravity really are. And if he utters the phrase speed of light in a vacuum, which you can bet he will do, then you could tell him on top of that he has no idea what light is. It's like, there's one thing we do know for sure. Light's the constant speed for inertial observers, and it has a fixed speed in a vacuum. All right, that's the one thing they will try to say. Now, here we have an equation with three unknown entities neatly packaged together to denote what exactly? Don't give me Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because the atomic bomb has nothing to do with this equation. It's a Coulomb device, and J.J. Thomson, which Einstein clearly hasn't bothered to read, had calculated it a decade earlier, or the amount of energy available from one hydrogen atom as 1 million tons lifted to the height of 100 yards. Now that should do it. So yeah, J.J. Thomson did come up with the coefficient for that. And then there was Hazel-Norrell, something like that, a couple years before him as well too. Like a bunch of people were popping off right around this late 1800s to 1900s with derivations for E equals MC squared. Einstein excelled in being absent from lectures which tell us he wasn't particularly inclined to listen to others to try and understand. He may have said something about standing on the shoulders of giants, but if we don't open our eyes to see, you don't see. But if you don't open your eyes, you don't see farther than standing on the ground with your eyes closed. I kept wanting to read that as father, and I was like, that's not right. All right. And so physicists today stand by with closed eyes, grouping a darkness for dark matter and dark energy and the darkness of black holes, while string theorists are getting hopelessly lost in the bewildering jungle of 10 to the frickin' power of 500 universes, none of which qualifies as ours. Now, that's what I call an epic failure, a 10 to the 500 failure. Only because they all arrogantly refuse to understand induction. That is something for electrical engineers, they say. That's blue collar stuff, not for us white collar ivory tower geniuses with our big brains and whatnot. Brenner didn't say that part, but I feel like he definitely would have. Yeah, right. Induction is what powers our modern world and the entire universe, but physicists are obviously beyond that, it seems, to cramp their style. Dielectric induction is the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. If you don't bother to understand this fundamental principle, you might as well hang out at the beach and enjoy your life. Induction and atomism are incompatible. You have to divorce all your notions of photons, electrons as particles, and with it, the entire fantasy of the particle zoo CERN is producing. Take a handful of spaghetti and break it in half. What you'll see is a bunch of terminal ends of spaghetti. So you clearly are seeing something which you name and describe, but the terminal ends is not the thing itself. But that's how it works with the quote unquote particles. They are the terminal ends of lines of induction, not something with an autonomous existence. CERN is doing nothing but breaking spaghetti and giving the terminal ends names, and the more energy they pump into the apparatus, the more spaghetti they break. But one wouldn't call that a path of discovery, would one? J.J. Thomson knew all about this, and of course, all of the great minds who were technologically to a 100% run our civilization. McFarlane, Heaviside, Steinmetz, Tesla, and others, as opposed to mystics like Schrödinger, Heisenberg, and Einstein, who have given us nothing but confusion. To their credit, we have to say that all three of them, towards the end of their lives, knew and had honesty to state in no uncertain terms that it was all a waste. Oh, nice. Quote from Schrödinger in the 50s. Let me say at the outset in this disclosure, I am not opposing a few special statements of quantum mechanics / quantum theory held today. I am opposing it as if it were the whole of it. I don't like it, and I'm sorry I had anything to do with it. Quote from Heisenberg, 1971. That even major modifications of the present theories would not transform them into the desired new theory, whereas the need for a whole new revolution whereas the need for a whole revolution of thought, which can only be carried through carried by nonconformists. Shout out to the nonconformist lads, guys. You guys are going to carry it through. Quote from Heisenberg himself. All right. He says, while you're at it, you may also divorce the notion of electrons as the carrier charge, the notion of electricity running through the wires, and electric energy as transported inside the wires. Electrons are responsible for energy loss and heat production, nothing else. The electric energy is transported via the dielectric medium outside of the wires, here's Charles Steinmetz around the turn of the last century. That's how behind we are. Quote from Steinmetz. Unfortunately, to a large extent, in dealing with the dielectric fields of prehistoric conception of the electric charge, or of the prehistoric conception of the electric charge on the conductor still exist, and by its use destroys the analogy between the two components of the electric field, the magnetic and the dielectric. The terminology of electrostatics of many textbooks still speaks of electric charges on conductors and the energy stored by them, without considering that the dielectric energy is not on the surface of the conductor, but in the space outside of the conductor, just as the magnetic energy. End quote. The fundamental relation given by QV, what is this?
That's a versor as opposed to a vector.
Versor. What does that do? If you happen to know off the top of your head.
Is exactly what we covered last Brenner comp. He talks about how there are versors and there are vectors. It's not coming to mind what the difference is. I think it's a question of which scalars you're adding.
All right, so the fundamental relation given by the versor equals Q versor equals Q cosine theta plus K sine theta indicates that the electromagnetic induction QII equals sine theta is the only partial component of the electrical component of the complete electric induction. Hold on one second, Stone. Your mic's doing that thing where it's can't be. Hold on.
Not to worry. Good. Let me just do it.
Oh, there we go. We're good. Yep, we're good. Okay, sorry about that. Complete electric induction Q. Due to the existence of the complementary component QI equals cosine theta, and this complementary component is a cosine, i.e. the longitudinal wave with dielectric and magnetic component in conjunction instead of opposition. Lord Kelvin in the mid-19th century already knew, quote from Lord Kelvin, that these electrical waves are condensational waves in the luminiferous ether, and probably it would be that the propagation of these waves would be enormously faster than the propagation of ordinary light waves. If you have issue with the term luminiferous ether, you must hasten to reintroduce it into your vocabulary, because without it, you will remain a fool for the rest of your life. Light is an excitation process of a medium. That's why it can be instantaneously, quote unquote, and slow down on its passage through a glass prism and quote unquote instantaneously speed up again at the exit point. Oh my God. Never thought of it like that. That's so well put. Dang. Okay. If light would be a material projection, that would be impossible. Light is the medium. Light has no property which you can call a speed. The medium has a property called a rate of processing in electromagnetic excitation. Also, with a magnet, you can disturb a cathode ray 30 feet away, although the direct influence of the magnet is only a couple of inches. That's like a man with a 5-foot wingspan standing in the middle of a pond, reaching out to disturbing a beach 100 feet away when flailing his hands by exciting the medium.
True.
Here's for the grand unifying theory from 1851 from Michael Faraday. Quote, "The long and constant persuasion that all the forces of nature are mutually dependent, having one common origin, or rather being different manifestations of one fundamental power, has made me often think upon the possibilities of establishing, by experiment, a connection between gravity and electricity, how dare you, and introducing the former into the group of a chain, with including also magnetism, chemical force, and heat binds so many of the varied exhibitions of force together by common relations." End quote. Here,
Faraday was the man.
dude, he sounds like a straight G. He knew what was going down. He was like, "You said what now?" You derived everything from a lead sphere? Anyway, where were we at here? Sorry about that. Here, Faraday was way ahead of his time. Conceptually overcomes Newton, something Nikola Tesla does in practice by showing us his virtual ground, quote, virtual ground, that the world of induction, Newton's laws of action and reaction do not hold. Something like giving Usain Bolt a virtual starting block to push off of. Nice. All right, here we go. So for Oliver Heaviside, it was given, quote, "The law of continuity of energy is maintained when the energy existent at one time disappear but reappears at another time," end quote. Because he understood hysteresis, right. And from Steinmetz, it was given that something can be where it's not, time is not. Something can be where its time is not. Okay. Because he understood hysteresis. Okay. All right. They also understood that the energy is a primary phenomenon, but with a time derivative of the total electric induction, W equals Q over T, and what is absolutely crucial, they understand the concept of counter space, that is the concept of 1 over space. It is in this context completely and utterly forget Minkowski, erase him and everything associated with his name from your gray matter hard drive, because it is absolutely useless for the understanding of nature. When it comes to space, what counts is to understand that the nanometer scale has more quote-unquote counter space than a centimeter scale of that same amount of energy. Hurts when it comes from the ultraviolet, but does not in its form of infrared. As an analogy, that means when I hit you with a light stick divided into nanometers, it hurts you more by hitting you with the same length than a yardstick divided by centimeters. Now I suggest that you divert your brain power you wasted by grappling with relativity and quantum physics and use it to wrap your mind around this, because this will get you somewhere, and as society, it will bring the technology which will still be for the foreseeable future reserved for scientific movies. So In order to have a technological future at all, we need to drop Einstein like a hot potato and gently, but also gently and thankfully bid Newton adieu. What a great Brenner comp.
Boom.
I feel
yeah.
like we've read that one before.
He tends to. I mean, he's not afraid to use the same point or like the same points in multiple answers. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one though. Good stuff. All right, Dave, how are we at on your meeting, sir? Oh, good.
On that point, though, I think that's how he portrays consistency of his position, is that he's
agreed.
revisiting the same themes a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you go back to what you said about the prism slowing down and speeding up?
Yes, I think it's right here.
That's all about permissible rate of propagation, and it's about the density of the medium. That's why it can instantly speed up again, because there's less inhibition for the perturbation. Sounds pretty kinky, too.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy, man. They're just like, oh no, what's really happening, Stone, is that light's just bouncing around in there in the molecular structure, and it has a longer path length to travel. It's not actually slowing down. Like, that's what they say, dog. It's so crazy. It's like, it's so obvious the way he puts it. He's just like, it's instantaneous. That's why it's just based off of the rate of induction, of where you're looking at it through the mediums. So it's not that it's traveling. It already happened, and you're just looking at oscillation rates for which you're able to process things.
It seems
It's
like the
just
fact that
illusion.
the speed changes, pretty much instantaneously. Like the rate of change of the speed is faster than like than light speed. Right?
Yeah.
Something happening, something physically changing near instantaneously is like a rate that is beyond what they claim the speed of light is.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone else want to read one? Dave, Travis, Piezo.
Yeah, I'll read this. What mathematics does a person need? Yeah, I'll read one.
Nice.
Nice.
Did you want to share your screen? Yeah. Did you want to share your screen, or do you want one of us to?
Yeah, I already downloaded it. I can pull it up if you want, since I'm already streaming.
Can you get a little closer to your mic, Travis?
Yeah.
A less speakerphony approach.
Okay, let me see here. Wait, are you just going to share, Alan?
Yeah, you can just read it from here. It's just a one page, right? Just save everything.
Yeah, just a one page. Yeah. Am my mic's okay?
Yeah, you just need to be a little closer to it, I think. But you sound like you're kind of like 3 feet away.
All right. Is this a little bit better, Stone?
Marginally. Give it a shot.
Okay. All right. What mathematics does a person need to achieve full understanding of modern physics? All right. So you don't need math to understand physics. You need to understand physics first and be prepared to follow logic, and only then apply math as a tool and a language. You cannot investigate physics with math, because math is
tautology.
Tautology. Every term that is connected to another term with an equal sign is a tautological expression.
You got it.
Tautological expression per definition. In math, you are always saying, and apple is an apple. If you start with the left term apple, you can set an equal sign to the term core plus flesh plus skin, but all you ever have is the apple. You never leave the semantic realm of the first term. This approach will never give you the knowledge that there is something like a pair out there. you'd have to send somebody out into the physical world, find a pair, and start all over describing it mathematically. That's what happened with Newton and gravity. He had the apple and applied math to describe what he observed happening to apple when it dropped from the tree, which became the inverse square law of attraction. But his math would never have gotten him to realize that particles in a gas behave the opposite way. They repel each other, following an inverse square law of repulsion. For that, he had to send somebody out into the real world and find out about the behavior of gas particles. And that someone was Robert Boyle, who showed experimentally that pressure in a gas is inverse proportional to volume. Math couldn't have done it, experiments did. If you stay with physics and logic, it becomes obvious that a self compressing gaseous sun is a mathematical product based on false logic, not physically observed, and experiment backed reality. The only way to understand physics is experiment and observation. Math is only the language to talk about these observations. Everything beyond experiment and observation is speculation, philosophy, wishful thinking, anything but physics. Hilbert spaces, string theory, Calabi Yau manifolds, and stuff like that has nothing to do with physics. Einstein has nothing to do with physics either, because he never performed a single experiment to back up his claims. Theoretical physics is a contradiction in terms and therefore a scam. This becomes glaringly obvious in CERN, where they make you believe they find elementary particles while the entire apparatus is powered by particle-free induction energy. So, your question should read, what mathematics does a person need to understand modern mathematics? And the answer is obvious. Modern mathematics. Physics ain't in it.
Wow.
I love when he throws an ain't on the end.
All
Nice, dude. Awesome. Thank you. Good read.
What does it mean, particle-free induction energy? Like, what is? Are they just like shooting electricity through a vacuum? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. And then
This
using
is the
magnets.
magic of the B field, this whole thing.
Like, what are they actually doing in there? Like, what's happening? They have a vacuum chamber and they're shooting. Like, what's going on? Do you know, Stone?
Well, they won't let me in there, so no. But the theory of the craft revolves, pun intended, all around EM and what we do to produce a B field. And once we do that, we want to create a shape to the B field, and in this case, it's toroidal, which means that it's donut shaped, which means that there's no start or end to it. It is cyclic, and this is why they call them cyclotrons way back in the beginning, accelotrons. Um, no reference to the movie. It's all about what they do around that toroid, and what they do is they coil the shit out of it, because that's where the B field is produced. If you just put in your mind what they showed with the right-hand rule, physically speaking, to produce torque in 2 papers ago, the same thing is done with EM theory, that fingers curled, thumb sticking out the end, if the electron flow is the direction of your fingers out of your knuckles towards your tips of your fingers, then the north, so to speak, is the direction your thumb is pointing in your right hand. They're doing the same thing here, where those fingers that you're wrapping are essentially you gripping the donut with your fingers, and the thumb is now inside the donut shape, and that's where the B field is produced. That is the cycle that is moving gas essentially around inside the donut. That's what they're doing. And then you run things in one direction, you run things in the other direction, and then you slowly change the angle of propagation so that they intersect and big mashy smashy things happened. At really fast speeds, at really high energy levels, and the energy level they're referring to is the strength of the B field. This is why it takes so much power to run the thing, so much current going through it to produce such high electromagnetic strength fields, mega, giga, Teslas, whatever you want to measure them in. Yeah, that's essentially what they're doing.
They're shooting energy and then varying the angle so that like the two opposite directions that they're shooting it in like intersect in a various angles, and when the energy like smashes into
Like
the
head-on
energy.
angles. Yeah, directly
Okay.
180-degree head-on angles, So like stuff's going clockwise around it, the other stuff's going counterclockwise around it, and then they bring those two streams together. A couple of molecules manage to go bing bang in front of the plate where they record what happens in terms of light emission, and all of a sudden, hey, look, all those new particles we found. Yeah, right.
Okay, so they just get some crazy spectra on the energy readout when they smash energy together and they say it's particles.
And they try to find some consistency through it, and they can derive law by doing that, yeah.
Yep. And then they use
Okay.
supercomputers to map out the data to find, like consistent energy fluctuations that have like the same kind of time variable for consistency, like Stone was saying. And then once they have that, they're like, oh, okay, bet this one's a lepton charm that, it's like, okay.
And that means Franco can pay his rent without flipping fries.
Yep. Shout out to the boys at CERN. All right. So we're
This is
going
an
to
up down
read.
strangely.
You're good.
All right.
No, you're good. You're good. What's up?
No. I didn't. I was just nothing.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So we're going
Without
to.
CERN, it's all burgers and fry baskets for Franco, right? So, they got to keep it going.
I'm sure there's a use for kinematic nonsense somewhere. Like they got to teach it somewhere. Just as long as he, tells everyone. Anyway, let's see here. So we got this one, and then Ken linked one called. Oops, that's the wrong one. 1 second. What was the one? This one. So Ken had this one. Has anyone attempted to disprove the equivalence principle? So which one do you guys want to?
Ooh, nice. And also there is a that one is on Ether Cosmology.
I can read it. I don't even know what it is, so
But
Okay.
it wouldn't
I'd like
hurt
to
to
learn
read it
about
again.
You want to take the equivalence prince?
Sure, if you'll put it up.
All right. Yep. Give me 1 second. Let me get the PDF so that it's. I don't have to. You said it was on EtherCos?
No, I mean there's a reading of it on the YouTube.
Well, that's not helpful.
Gotcha. All right, here we go. You ready? You ready, PZO?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Here we go. We'll go left to right.
All right. Has anyone attempted to disprove the equivalence principle of physics? There may be mathematical equivalence, but not necessarily physical equivalence. What we call science today is a confirmatory exercise. So any approach that threatens confirmation of the established and accepted, i.e., any approach leading to actually disproving anything, is weeded out. And all controversy is just a show, ending always in so far no dice, as David Chittikel says in his answer, reflecting a widely held belief. The equivalence principle is based on Galilean relativity, which was a desperate attempt to find a convincing argument for the indistinguishability between, or the equivalence of, the heliocentric and geocentric models. An attempt so flawed logically that the church, well trained in logic, did not buy it. It was Galileo versus Aristotle, and Galileo, nicknamed the Wrangler at university, was not shy to take it up with the old master. Aristotle said, "When a rock is allowed to fall to the ground from a tall tower, it is observed to land at the foot of the tower. If the earth was moving through space while the rock was falling, then it should land in a different place." And Galileo said, "The vertical path of a falling object does not compel one to the conclusion that the earth is stationary." Galileo argues the following in typical Wrangler fashion. drop a rock from the top of the mast of a ship. Whether the ship is at rest or moving with a constant velocity, the rock always lands, he says, just at the foot of the mast. Thus, an observation of the point of impact on a deck reveals nothing, he says, of the ship's state of motion. And in analogy to that, a rock dropped from the top of a tower thus does not reveal, he says, the Earth's state of motion. This is the kind of rhetoric for which Galileo was actually expelled from university, because it ruined the cognitive capacities of his colleagues and thus the educative goals of the prestigious institute.
One big point for Galileo. My rank.
We have bought into this for all too long, and it's time to expel Galileo again. Galileo mixes two arguments in two situations while clandestinely making one unjustified point, or clandestinely, that we cannot empirically experience any motion of the Earth. First is the argument that a rock always lands next to the mast when dropped from next to the mast, independent of the motion of the ship. And second is the argument that a man on the shore has a different visual perspective. Yeah, there's the charts. Droppy, droppy, and droppy, droppy, and straight, straighty, and curvy, curvy.
Here we go with reference frame.
Yeah, okay, I think I can see it now. When the boat's relatively at rest in port, the man drops a stone from the mast. The stone appears to both of the relatively stationary observers, the man and the girl, to fall straight down, and it lands near the foot of the mast. Now a boat moving with uniform velocity, as the boat leaves port and begins to sail at uniform speed straight ahead, the man drops another stone from the top of the mast. The stone again lands near the foot of the moving mast, and to the observers on board, who share the same common lateral inertial motion as the ship and the stone, it appears like it fell straight down. Why? Because the body of reference for the observers on board is the uniformly moving boat and its mast, not the relatively stationary water. The stone falls along a vertical path that is moving with the ship.
There's one factor in that. Oh, one sec, Pizzo. Just scroll back up. There's one factor there that is shown but not put into the analysis. Can you guys see it?
The sail?
Yeah, you see the sail, right? It's all full out, like there's wind blowing, right?
Yeah.
Well, that should be also doing something to the rock. So in this particular, in diagram B, the rock should actually fall slightly closer to the mast. It's actually going to be moving a little faster than the boat because of the water friction slowing down the boat.
Yeah.
Right? It's a constant velocity, but there's this wind contingent coming from stern that's going to affect the rock as well as the boat.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a net forward on the rock. Whatever. Go for it.
Can you scroll down a little bit, Al? Yeah. However, for the man on the shore who has a different visual perspective and a different body of reference, vis-a-vis the shore and water which are at rest relative to the boat, and who does not share the same common inertial motion with the boat, the man on the mast and the stone, for him, the trajectory of the falling stone appears to be curving forward relative to the boat. Why? Because the man on the shore has a different perspective. And his reference body is the relatively stationary shore and water, not the uniformly moving boat and mast. Question: which observation is correct? Answer: the perception of each observer is relative to his position, his perspective, and his reference body. Relativityoflight.com, chapter 5 from the book. The first argument is taken from a stationary flat Earth situation, because only on a stationary flat Earth, the top of the mast has the same velocity as the bottom, and that is v equals 0 for standing, and v top equals v bottom for moving. The second argument is simply not true, because of course the man on shore also sees the rock drop along the mast and not the path as depicted. The dotted line is a projection onto a virtual stationary canvas, and this projection is the same for the mariner on the boat as it is for the man ashore. It is a matter of choice, a matter of reference, not a matter of physics. And now, Galileo moves the whole scenario over to a rotating, orbiting Earth without acknowledging the dynamic differences, which he wants us to believe aren't there, but they are, of course. Oh, the difference between common uniform motion and equivalent states of uniform motion. Distance traveled by Is that S prime? It's hard to see. S prime from the dock equals VT, the uniform relative velocity. Okay. Got the two ships, ship at position X, ship at position X prime. Looks like one is chilling. One is moving forward, and the Earth is also moving forward. Calm and uniform motion. The lady observer on the dock on the left, and the passengers on board the ship on the left, at rest in port, share the same common inertial motion of the Earth. They're all at rest with respect to the Earth. The lady, the dock, the ship S are all relatively at rest. On the right, the passengers on board the ship on the right, smoothly sailing uniformly straight ahead, at a velocity relative to the position of the ship to the left, all share the same common uniform velocity of the ship, but they do not share the same common inertial motion of the Earth when the ship was in port. Their uniform velocity is only equivalent to the motion of the Earth and ship at rest in port, in the sense that the passengers and objects at both positions empirically feel and move as if they are absolutely at rest. The man walking at a uniform velocity is not accelerating and therefore cannot demonstrate the invariance of Newton's second law of motion.
One second. There you
go. All right. On a spherical, can you scroll up just a little? Oh, sorry. On a spherical rotating platform, the top of the mast, as well as the top of the tower, have a different tangential velocity for the top versus for the bottom. Because momentum is conserved and tangential velocity is independent of radial acceleration, the rock, starting with the higher tangential velocity, will by conservation of momentum land forward of the mast and not, as Galileo claims, right next to it. Add to that during a trip north along a meridian, due to the inevitable velocity gradient of a rotating sphere, the ship's east to west tangential velocity drops during the fall of the rock. And thus, the distance from the mast where it lands increases even more. In that manner, one could in principle determine exactly the location and state of motion of the ship. Yep, makes sense. Thus, Galileo's statement that the vertical path of a falling object does not compel one to the conclusion that the Earth is stationary is simply wrong. Galileo counts on the differences being too small to measure and the intellect of the public too weak to recognize the ruse. But that doesn't change the fact that the principle he proposes is fundamentally flawed. This fundamental flaw of reasoning is then carried straight over to Einstein in his line of argumentation, which, in view of it being made in the 20th century and coming from the prestigious Max Planck Institute, becomes nothing less than embarrassing. Yeah. If you are an observer inside the elevator, then it's easy to find an answer to that question. The elevator is in free fall, and so are you. According to the equivalence principle, the laws of physics in your immediate neighborhood are those of special relativity. Light travels at a constant speed along straight lines. Therefore, light entering the cabin horizontally will continue to travel in the horizontal direction. If there's a second hole in the elevator wall, straight across from the first, then the light will leave the cabin through that hole. In the animation, the laser pulse is the red dot. Light speed has been slowed down artificially so you can follow the dot's progress. To see that it is traveling along a straight line, the dot has been made to leave a trace. Now that we know how light travels as seen by an observer inside the cabin, we can deduce what an outside observer will see. Initially, the light travels horizontally. On this, both observers agree, given that they're at rest relative to each other at the start. Also, both observers agree that the light pulse enters through one hole and leaves through the other. But from the outside observer's point of view, the elevator starts to fall at the precise moment that the light pulse enters it. Whatever the details of the light pulse's motion, it will require a certain time to cross the elevator compartment. During that time, the cabin will have moved downward, and so will the second hole, through which the light pulse later makes its exit. Consequently, from the point of view of the outside observer, the light pulse cannot travel along a straight line. After all, a straight line which is initially horizontal remains horizontal and at the same height. Instead, the outside observer will see something like this. That is retarded.
That's the droopiest light beam I've ever seen.
Like Galileo's guy on the sword, here the outside observer will, of course, not see something like this, as the article claims. Watch the animation here, the equivalence principle and the deflection of light, and try not to laugh out loud watching the light actually being depicted as doing this. Yeah, that's retarded.
Yeah, I get a meme for that or whatever.
Let's have a closer look at how exactly physics professors willingly or unwillingly teach you nonsense. Below is given one of hundreds of flawed illustrations available in textbooks used to trick you into believing this kind of nonsensical stuff. Yeah.
A great,
Bruh.
great little diagram there.
Yeah,
Show
he's
this-
shooting a Kamehameha like style energy beam out of his hand, and it's curving because the elevator. That is
Say it.
yeah.
Well, those
That is
three
retarded.
lines there actually represent what the guy in the elevator sees. That part is valid. That I think is correct. Yeah, if as long as the whatever's going from left to right in the elevator there is moving real slow relative to the acceleration, for example, or real slow relative to the velocity in the second, that is what he would see. This is also part of a refraction principle between A and B, if you will, where velocity is tying to density of the medium. Can you guys see that relation between the observer and the velocity of the guy in the elevator? That when the light is entering from one side, if there is a velocity that is anything faster than the observer, there's going to be a downward angle in what the guy in the elevator sees. So that part is technically valid.
The second one, you mean?
Yeah, when we move from A to B there, the A is correct, obviously, because that's just a straight line propagation. But when we look at B, what we're saying is that the propagation is very slow compared to the velocity.
Yeah.
So much faster than the observer guy standing there. And in the third one, again, the acceleration is dramatic compared to the velocity of this thing moving across the stream or however fast, whatever that is.
Yeah, that dude's going superliminal.
It's what the guy in the elevator sees. It's not what the observer sees. So there's half truth in here.
Yeah, I mean, we could just change it to water.
These.
Just knock out the left wall of the elevator, make it a stream of water, and a really fast elevator. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we take the entrance of light at time t1 and exit of light at time t2, then obviously the illustration represents time t2. But the guy holding the light is still represented as standing at time t1. At time t2, the elevator obviously has also moved past the guy holding the light, which would now be right opposite the exit point.
Precisely. The elevator moves, but you can't depict that in a single frame.
Yeah. Also, the light's path. Also, the light's path after exiting is not depicted, which would be a straight line, of course, and not constituting the parabola like in the silly animation presented by the Max Planck Institute. And thus, the entire situation would rather look like this. Light travels always in a straight line, and only the projected trace, which is an abstract, not a real itinerary, may seem curved. Yeah.
So what he did was he superimposed both references.
Yeah. Make your own experiment. Take a ruler, take a pencil and a piece of paper, place the ruler over the paper and begin to draw a line. Ask a friend to pull the paper in one or the other direction. Watch the trace outline a diagonal for constant velocity or a curve for accelerated pulling of the paper. Ask yourself if the outline trace represents the actual itinerary of an object. You will find it does not. The only real paths traveled are two rectilinear orthogonal motions. Nothing is curved and therefore light does not fall in gravity, which is the silly and unphysical idea this flawed thought experiment tries to convey and push through. Gravity and elevator have physically nothing to do with each other. This is complete nonsense, and therefore Einstein can only make it work in the infinitesimal, which is not physical reality. Therefore, like Galileo, Einstein's statement, quote, and in the discussion that follows, we shall therefore assume the complete physical equivalence of a gravitational field and a corresponding acceleration of the reference system, end quote, is simply wrong. Again, it is counted on the public being beholden to the authority of their teachers instead of trusting their own intellect to push through such asinine notions.
Amen. Bendy light rays.
Yeah, the photons are just bouncing around in there. So you're actually seeing information from behind a curve as it's traveling. Like it's just, it's, the information just updating every
Few extra
nanosecond.
bounces, yeah.
But it's also been traveling for like a billion years or whatever. I don't know.
No, you're not seeing like an illuminated field where the light's instantaneous and like you're looking through different media, like, the medium or whatever, but it's definitely
I heard
traveling around a curve.
some people are starting to not trust atheists that say they can see into the past.
Well, they're notoriously accurate, I heard. So you should probably always trust them or whatever.
Okay. When
19th decimal place,
Einstein,
dude.
when Einstein tried to apply his elevator concept to the real world, he could not but admit failure. It is, for instance, impossible to choose a body of reference such that, as judged from it, the gravitational field of the Earth vanishes, which he would need to be able to show if he were to uphold his postulate that says that no experiment, no clever exploitation of the laws of physics can tell us whether we are accelerating in free space or in a gravitational field. Therefore, Einstein had to relegate the entirety of relativity into the unphysical realm of the infinitesimal. Within an infinitely small space-time region, one can always find a reference frame, an infinitely small elevator cabin, observed over an infinitely brief period of time, in which the laws of physics are the same as in special relativity. Are you freaking kidding me?
No. It's literally how the whole thing works, dog.
And they ate it up.
This is an unscientific statement because if you cannot observe it and measure it, it is wild speculation. And in this case, it is also wildly irrational, whereas rationality is another cornerstone of science. This, together with my last several posts where I've shown that Newton pulled your leg with the postulated fall of the moon of 14 millimeters per second, and Kepler duped you with the unphysical notion of a constant aerial velocity, is now the 20th century equivalent of this kind of cheap deception, all geared to maintain a totally made up and physically untenable cosmological model. In answer to the question, since Copernicus, everything has been mathematical, nothing has been physical. In his preface to his De Revolutionibus, Copernicus admonishes us that it is all about computation, not about physics. So far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest he accept as the truth ideas conceived for another purpose, and depart from this study a greater fool than when he entered it. Farewell. We have all become the greater fools Copernicus refers to, because we take for truth something that has been conceived for another purpose, and that is the purpose of computing, not the purpose of making statements about physics. Okay.
Great paper.
It's good to see that people
That's
have reached the same conclusion.
This is a dino concept when he started to invoke radius. And, the curvier thing, and that up on the mast, if you were way higher, that you would have a different tangential momentum. That relates directly to the video that I did about Felix Baumgartner's jump. In that he went up with a balloon, and as he increased R, he should have fallen behind the rotational speed of the Earth that he left before he went straight up 24 miles over an hour and a half, right? So if his R is increased by 24 miles and then he jumps out of it, considering that when he left the ground there was zero wind, he should land to the west. It should spin to the east faster underneath him. Yet somehow he landed way far to the east. And I present all of the rotational math for that in the video. And I haven't seen anybody comment to the contrary on that on the BitChute page. It's straight up. It relates directly to what Brenner was talking about here.
Well, I agree with his tangential velocity thing. I think the particle boys would just say that
Oh, it's just the air. The air helps account for the difference. It just air drags it back into equilibrium infinitesimally over time every second.
Hmm.
Hashtag particle boy steel man.
Particle boy man. All right.
It's hard to steal, man, something that makes absolutely no sense in physics.
Yeah, that's what I call them now. I call them particle boys.
Particle lads, particle crew,
Well,
retards
they're
or whatever.
Boy, particle
The
boys.
Atomic
There are
lads.
magical whirlwind.
Atomic lads.
There are magical
The best-
whirlwinds behind it that make it give it a kinematic equivalence, but dynamic equivalence as well. But you just don't know about the little whirlwinds. You can't measure them.
Yeah, that's so I was gonna say the best you can do is just steel man the kinematic concept.
Yeah. All right. So, Dave, are you available to read it, or what's up?
Yep, I am.
My man.
Actually, it's perfect because the one I picked a few there. I put them in the chat because they all are good for anyone that wants to read a short one. There's 3 in that one there, and then there's 2 here, and there's 3 in the top one. So I was kind of deciding which ones. I'm going to go for the relevant topic at hand, which is the one that's why don't we feel the Earth's rotation, as well as another short one. Why would the atmosphere rotate with the Earth?
Ooh, nice. Let's see, I think I got the first one. And actually, hold on one second. Save image as. And then. I got how do I prove flat Earth theory from you, and then it gets into the atmosphere stuff. What'd you say the other one was?
No, there's one with just 2 on it. That was the second one I posted. It's got the Earth's rotation and the atmosphere as the 2.
All right. Why don't we feel Earth's rotation? I got this one. Oh, I see what you did. Got you. It's a twofer. Okay.
The 2-fer.
See what you're doing. I see what you did there, Dave. All right.
Yeah, kind of related.
Oops, now it's stuck on that. All right. This is as far as I can zoom in. Nice. It's like kind of unacceptable.
Yeah. Like a Linux issue or whatever, probably.
What?
What's that, like 4 or 5 Linux issues, or I'm not just counting?
None really. Anyway, continue, Dave.
Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna read off my copy that I made for uploading all of these, so you can follow along as I'm reading and for the audience to read the scroll. But I'm just gonna be reading from my, so you don't have to worry about catching up for me.
Gotcha.
I'm just gonna be reading from my gallery. So, okay, the question is, why don't we feel Earth's rotation? There is this straightforward and simple answer, which strangely seems to be the most elusive one. There is no rotation. This simple answer, though, is associated with such a horrendous consequence that it is dismissed with the most desperate excuses. Edwin Hubble. Such a condition would imply that we occupy a unique position in the universe, and analogous, in a sense, to the ancient conception of central Earth. This hypothesis cannot be disproved, but it is unwelcome and would only be acceptable as a last resort in order to save the phenomena. Therefore, we disregard this possibility. The unwelcome position of a favored location must be avoided at all costs. Such a favored position is intolerable. Therefore, in order to restore homogeneity and to escape the horror of the unique position, it must be compensated by spatial curvature.
Can you move your mic?
Did he sound terrible? All of a sudden?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just a little too hot on the mic there, Dave.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, that was me. I turned down the
All right.
bit rate
How
a
about
little
now?
bit.
How's the volume now?
Something changed.
Something better?
It
Better,
was the
good?
bit
Better,
rate that
worse?
had changed. I had turned the bit rate down. So I just turned it back up.
How's everything now?
Sounds good.
It's good.
It's
Yeah,
still
it's
pretty
noticeable. It's weird.
You were like in a bad spot or something.
Okay, it could be because I have my my thing. Let me just see if this is going to change the way it sounds. Testing now compared to testing
good.
now. Is it worse now though? Because I just plugged in.
But
Does
you're
that make
not
it
speaking
worse?
as loudly as you were before. They're both a little on the hot side.
Testing now. Okay.
I
was
think
moving
it's
my-
adequate. I think it sounds good.
It's good. Okay. Right now is okay. Testing. Okay. Should I start
Yeah.
over?
Yeah,
No,
no,
just keep going
just-
downhill from there.
Yep.
Okay, so Edwin Hubble, we've all heard that quote before about the horror of occupying a unique position, and that was the philosophical decision. You know, the Copernican revolution and all that was all attached to that. Anyway, so it says it only goes downhill from there, and some of the answers here demonstrate. Quote: "We don't feel the spinning of the Earth because we are spinning along with it." Narayanan, whoever that is, try to repeat this statement while standing on a rotating carousel. Another quote: "The Earth's rotational angular velocity is very slow. It turns 360 degrees in 24 hours. Needleman. And he says, angular velocity is irrelevant. What is relevant is how far from the hub you are rotating. And 6,371 kilometers is a long way out, making you do over 1,600 kilometers an hour, which you would definitely feel going in circles on the equator, for instance." Another quote: "It turns out that there is no need to explain motion." That's from Reland, referring to Galileo. This opinion is the devastating effect of a Galileo trick aimed at making angular velocity indistinguishable from translational velocity, which of course it is not. Rotation has a dynamic origin and is therefore independent of external reference frames. It is absolute and not relative. Another quote: "You can certainly see the Earth's rotation. Look up at the sky." That's from Josh Ingle, definitely not a physicist. And he says, "That's like saying, look, our house is moving because I can see a train passing by." Good example. Then up to the top of the next page, and on in this manner it goes. Everybody totally ignoring the laws of dynamics of massive bodies. And on in this manner it goes. Everybody totally ignoring the laws of dynamics of massive bodies. That's the crux of the biscuit, isn't it, guys? Earth's rotation must be measurable directly, not deducible from motions of passing trains or stars. To that extent, Coriolis and Foucault are presented, but both evaporate as arguments on close inspection. Gunnery has not improved an iota with the introduction of a Coriolis effect, and gunners never employ it anyway. They take everything into consideration except the cardinal direction in which they are aiming, which they would have to. Would that effect be real? Today, gunners still feel their way to the target, calling it a success when the fourth round hits. Sniper manuals never even mention the name. And the Foucault pendulum is so unscientific in setup and results that it amounts to not more than a town fair showpiece. Historic pendulums have behaved notoriously erratic and unpredictable, disproving a causative connection to a rotation. And modern pendulums are driven by magnets. And as we can read, Academia Pendulum's installation manual, we need to spend days to adjust the setup until we get the correct precession, which, according to the believers in this device, should be a function of the Earth's rotation, not of adjustment. So it's a showpiece. That's all. The problem with the sphere is that it was established by Pythagoras purely on aesthetic grounds. It had to be perfection, and a sphere was considered perfect. Instead of physical investigations, and the latter proponents of the idea were dedicated Pythagoreans like Aristophanes, Copernicus, and Kepler, for instance. None of the bunch ever was an engineer or even a physicist. They were all philosophers and theologians and had no idea about and no interest in dynamics. I've been talking about many such dynamic aspects in other posts, like the necessary but not observed velocity gradient along meridians, about the difference between axial configural and radial gravitational acceleration, also not observed, about the dynamic impossibility of orbits, and many more. Here now, probably the most devastating aspect of the dynamics of rotating massive bodies, the fact that they will eventually rotate about their axis with the largest amount of inertia, especially if they can dissipate energy, like by way of a molecular core, for instance. The Earth's speculated rotation is by observation forced to align with Polaris. But Polaris is not above the Pacific, which it should be. Would the Earth with its uneven distribution of mass be allowed to rotate freely? In the image below, we see the Earth concentration of mass around the Pacific, which thus would automatically become the equator, especially in the light of having had 5 billion years of time to adjust to the minimum state of rotational energy. The speculated rotation is therefore compatible with the observed distribution of mass plotted onto a freely rotating globe. Therefore, it's not happening. And
Scroll it out.
therefore, we don't feel it. You know why we don't feel it? Because it's not happening. Wow, talk about Occam's razor. So yeah, it's just ridiculous, you guys. It's so ridiculous to even like that gets a pass, and we're talking about refraction for so many years. Refraction. We're still talking about refraction when the rotation is just like ridiculous. Not happening. Not happening. Anyway, I finished that one. That's the end of that one.
Yeah, good thing, Matt. Yeah, he's brought up that inertial point about change in axis in a couple other papers, and I find it very conspicuous. I think it's an excellent point.
Yeah, all the continents, like he says, with billions of years of rotation, you would have anything that the heavier, whatever it is, they would all coagulate at the equator eventually.
And if they didn't, then the Earth would start wobbling.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense. It's just a concept that got run wild with, and they used it to make us dumb. Obviously.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to read the second one too. What is?
Oh yeah, go for it. Sounds great.
If you want. Yeah, this is.
And then I got one more short one, and then we can close it out.
Okay.
Unless anyone else wanted to get one in that hasn't read yet.
Yeah, there's a bunch. That's why I put the other short ones in there too. If anyone wants to grab one of those little ones. So not only does it
go ahead.
The Earth not rotate, but then we can talk about that. If it did rotate, would the atmosphere really just rotate with it? Right? Would that even work? Does it even work? Is it even possible? Or is this just another kinematic? Well, it seems
it doesn't work, and it's for the whole R-related reason we read in the last paper that I was citing for Baumgartner. That's all related to the atmosphere. It's a larger R. It's got less rotational energy. There's no way it can keep up. It's ridiculous.
Nope. Yep, it is ridiculous. And so yeah, even if we did have the rotation, which isn't happening, the atmosphere wouldn't rotate with it, and it definitely wouldn't carry planes to be in a one-to-one relationship, so they could treat the Earth stationary when they're landing. If it's rotating, it doesn't work. My point. This is why I thought I'd maybe be a good thing for me to read this one, because it's something I talk a lot about, and they just
what? I've never heard you say that. What do you mean?
They boldface just claim this plane's just keeping that one-to-one relationship, even though winds are blowing it in all directions. It's flying wherever it wants, going all over the place, going against the rotation. But somehow, oh, it still maintains that 1-to-1 with the 1,000-mile-per-hour rotation, even though it came from a 500-mile-per-hour conserved momentum. It's just, it ends the argument. It debunks the globe so emphatically. There should not be any more discussion after that, in my opinion. That's why I stick with that one. Anyway, so how is it possible that the atmosphere rotates at the same speed of Earth's rotation? That's the question posed. Michael Brenner says, absolutely astounding how 15 to 20 years in school can leave people so unaware of the difference between states of matter, especially the two major categories, condensed matter and gaseous matter. The crystalline bond of solids, with its rigidity, allows for the transmission of forces throughout a rotating solid body, so that a rotating solid sphere carries all its constituents along on its merry-go-round without lagging behind, without friction. A gas, on the other hand, is composed of particles with a great degree of freedom, where the constituents have no relation between each other than what is considered to be perfectly elastic collisions. Keep in mind that if the particles in the above image were tennis balls, the average distance would be 6,5 meters. What that means? Every particle of air travels 1,000 times its size, hits a compatriot. Also, keep in mind that the concept of elastic collisions absolutely forbids the application of the concept of friction. The particles in the above animation don't influence each other by way of friction. They don't rub against each other. They collide, which is something else altogether. That's if you believe in particles, mind you. Now, apply this to the atmosphere and how it is supposed to follow Earth in its merry-go-round, like as if it would be a solid part of it, which means without slippage. Go out in nature on a perfectly calm day and let that situation sink in, and then visualize the doldrums, a broad band of practically zero relative movement between gas and solid Earth around the equator, where friction, that is slippage, be expected to be a maximum, but it's zero. There are so many fundamentally flawed notions thrown around in the answers here, it's hard to know where to start. But Adam Taylor certainly gets first prize with the quote, "Force is not required to keep something moving once it's moved." Here's the word, something. Here the word something is used as if it were valid universally, but of course it is not. It is only valid for Newtonian bodies, which a gas very definitely is not. Try to throw a handful of smoke in a big vacuum chamber and watch how far the gas particles will go in the direction of the throw without the constant application of a force. I think second prize also goes to Taylor. Quote, "The two merge on a molecular level." End quote. This qualifies as probably the wrongest sentence uttered in the entire known and unknown universe, because it is exactly what is not happening.
Including that one, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. What is not happening? A gas does not merge with a solid molecular level. It does not reduce its degree of freedom, even an iota. Or take Jesse Brewer's lapidary comment. Quote, "How could it possibly not? The atmosphere is part of the Earth," end quote. He says, since when and in what universe is a free gas part of a solid? The very definition of gas is the fact that its constituents are free and not part of each other, nor are they part of anything else. Again, try to throw a ball of gas in a vacuum chamber and see if the ball displays inertia. That is, does it keep moving as a coherent body of the direction of the throw? No, because gases do not form coherent bodies and therefore do not display the inertial behavior of coherent bodies. Or take C.S. Hardwick, quote, there is nothing in space to brush against, end quote. Also simply wrong because space still has a density of 10 to the 6th power particles per cubic meter. And so far, nobody has been able to explain which particle is the first particle belonging to space. That is the particle without the angular momentum necessary to be called part of the atmosphere. The difference in angular momentum between the last particle of the atmosphere and the first particle of space is the definition of a surface. Caught up? The difference in an angular momentum between the last particle of the atmosphere and the first particle of space is the definition of a surface, which gases per definition do not form. A gas has no definite shape or volume, i.e. no surface. If unconformed, the particles of a gas will spread out indefinitely. If confined, the gas will expand to fill its container. Here below is an illustration what one molecular layer of the atmosphere would look like over a rotating sphere. Any particular position is associated with a particular set of angular parameters. Add to that the third dimension of onion layers of such positions. As soon as one of these balls tries to change the position, it must change the entire set of angular parameters. But how does it do that? A gas particle has no idea where it is. A gas particle does not react to position. It reacts only to pressure, volume, and temperature. It is only wrongly claimed that the kinetic energy of a gas particle is Ke equals 0.5 meters times the volume squared. But that is the expression of Newtonian bodies, which a gas molecule is not. It is therefore that the expression of the kinetic energy of a gas particle reads like this: Ke equals 1.5 K times T, with a temperature, where temperature is the defining factor, which again is irrelevant to Newtonian bodies. A hot cannonball has the same potential energy and thus delivers the same kinetic energy on impact than a frozen one. A hot gas particle delivers a different kinetic energy than a cold one on impact. Because these expressions show mass of particle is irrelevant for temperature and thus irrelevant for the state of gas, gravity is irrelevant for the state of the atmosphere, because it cannot assign position to particles as it does with Newtonian bodies via the term potential energy, and certainly cannot drag a gas along orthogonally to the direction of action. The fact that we have constantly calm regions on Earth and calm days everywhere in general means that Earth cannot be a moving body. That's it. It can't be. To the folks coming back with, well, what is it then if you claim to know better than everyone else? I reply with Thomas Jefferson, quote, he who knows nothing is closer to the truth than he whose mind is filled with falsehoods and errors.
Brilliant globularity right there.
Yeah. That's it, boys.
That's a
No
pattern,
rotating.
right? No rotating. No centrifugal force, no tides, no gravity, none of that's real. So, hey.
No. Definitely not an atmosphere that can carry a freaking plane to be in a one-to-one relationship with it's trying to land a plane on the ground that it's going to be out of sync with, period.
So did anyone else want to do one? Or should I go and close out with this little short one that I got?
I think we can close
Cheers.
up with the
Yeah,
show.
we
Maybe
probably
someone will get
close out.
started.
Yeah.
Cool.
You're
All right.
going for a while.
I'm going to share my screen here. And this is, I
Isn't
want
this
to
guy-
say...
This guy is just a gold mine, isn't he? A shout out to Michael Brenner.
Yeah,
For real, dude. And thank you for finding them, you crazy J-View.
Yeah, that was a luck find, man. I was looking up counter space from listening to Witsit, and it was the counter space one that I did first. Counter space explanation. And I'm like, oh my god, guy has like what? How many? 300 entries? Oh my God!
He who explains counter space is welcome in our group.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Like
this one
anybody,
is
like not so many people can attempt to even try to explain counter space.
this was his 4th ever answer on Quora 7 years ago.
Ooh. Let's see if it changed.
So yeah, you guys can see it, right?
Good to go.
Cool. What are the conditions inside of gas planets? Good question. Yes, all celestial bodies are solid by necessity, but that's what makes them bodies. A gas answers to gas laws, which are quite different from the physics of solids and liquids. Gases need to be captured and attracted by high-density bodies. They do not form spheres on their own, despite what gravity junkies might want to tell you, especially when we take into consideration that gas clouds in space are generally made up of ionized gas, i.e., charged atoms and molecules. Gravity becomes irrelevant. Here is an image of the quote unquote pillars of creation, a huge gas cloud extending over 4 million light years, which still doesn't show a tendency to build a sphere. So, what we need is a dense rocky body to produce an attraction strong enough to hold onto light gases. By the way, stars are gas giants too, with a solid core and atmosphere, and in an atmosphere, the ionosphere of which glows depending on the incoming electromagnetic stimulation. Our atmosphere does that too, aurora, and we've seen it on Jupiter and Saturn. Modern space-based telescopes have found dwarf stars with glow temperatures in the range of hot coffee. So I guess it's time to retire the fusion version of stars, but that's another discussion. So you can kind of see like the evolution of
He was calling
stars-
stars tepid coffee before he started attacking the principals, I guess. Pretty good.
And so I just want to read this little comment here too. This was interesting. Please don't listen to this trite people. He is wrong on virtually all levels, and what he fails to mention, either out of ignorance or deliberate deception, is buried within those pillars of creation. Exactly the kind of collapse of gas into protostars that he disparages is actually taking place.
Don't worry, guys. It's definitely sphere.
He is a
Insult is the-
disgrace to my name.
Insult is the language of dogmatists. Equating star formation with collapse is a dogma, not an observation. Of course, star formation takes place within these clouds. I don't think he would say that nowadays. But these gas clouds are made up of ionized matter, and ionized matter does not act like neutral matter. Equations involving neutral matter and gravity do not apply. A gas cloud of charged particles has no chance of a gravitational collapse. Electromagnetism stands in the way of a wall of 40 orders of magnitude. You need electromagnetic power to compress charged matter. Only plasma Z-pinch compression can provide that power. The pattern of a star formation resemble lightning strikes, something that is totally alien to anything gravity can achieve. Therefore, the very observable patterns of star formation alone exclude gravity as the agent of formation. Gravity is not an organizing principle. Plasma is. The universe is practically in its entirety made up of charged separate matter, or charged separated matter, which we call plasma. Gravity has a very limited role in a plasma universe, not a formative. So, there you go.
Yeah.
That's what you call a critical thinker.
I'd like to
Doing some
know like
critical thinking.
how many of these nebulas like are actual images, because there are things up there that people, even amateur astronomers, can zoom in on that look a little bit like they're showing us with fantastic pictures. How many of them actually are there in the form, how close they are to the actual to the artistic rendering? The question I'd like to know.
Well, that's keeping a lot of people on the sphere, man, because that group I was in, they were all like talking about how cool their pictures of the stars were and how definitely they meant that, you know, they were seeing galaxies, and they were just so convinced, man. All of them, 100,000.
Yeah, absolutely. 100,000 people.
And that's what he had for sub. That's why we were there in the first place. I was like, who is this? Whoa, all right, I'll stay and see what's going on.
Oh, what did I
yeah.
miss? Where'd you go?
Nothing. No, they just all talked about their cameras and how to photograph stuff. But we hopped in to try and convince them otherwise, right?
It was a Twitter space, Dave. But yeah, we'll go and close it out here now. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Bring Your Own Brenner Comp number 2. And again, if you happen to have listened, Michael Brenner, then we are honored to have had your time. And thank you for all your work that you put in. And thank you, everyone, for being here and contributing And everyone that listened, I hope that you learned something. I know I always do when we do these. Whenever I, find a topic of his that, that I'm interested in, I tend to learn more. So this week, tune in on Tuesday for the geomagnetism presentation that I'll be doing. It'll be the Ether Roundtable 29. And I'll be talking about the magnetic field and the geodynamo. And then on Wednesday, I'm not sure if we have anything going on, but Thursday, reading night as always, and then Flat Earth Fridays on Friday. But thanks again for being